This story is titled, Brother Ruined My Life and My Parents Disowned Me. But now he shows up and begs me to help him because parents are threatening to cut him off financially. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hi Reddit. I'm Emily, 28 female, and to put it bluntly, I was never supposed to exist. At least not as a girl. That sounds dramatic, but it's the truth. My mom always dreamed of having 2 boys. She wanted her perfect, sporty little team of sons to carry on the family name and be everything she'd envisioned in her head. When she got pregnant with me and found out I was a girl, she was devastated. My Aunt Rachel, who I'm still close with, once told me something I've never been able to shake. Apparently, when my mom found out I was a girl, she actually looked into terminating the pregnancy. By the time she got serious about it, it was too late and considered risky. So I was born. Not as a blessing, but as a regret. Mom never outright told me I was unwanted, but she didn't have to. It was in the way she looked at me, the way she treated me, and honestly, the way she talked about me when she didn't think I was listening. I was a fussy baby, a needy toddler, and later, a difficult child. Nothing I did was ever good enough. And then there was my older brother, Jake, 30 male, who could do no wrong. Jake was their golden boy, the apple of their eye. He was everything I wasn't. Confident, charming, and honestly, a complete jerk. But my parents didn't see that. To them, Jake was perfect. If you asked them back then or even now, he practically walked on water. Jake wasn't just the favorite. He was the villain in my story. He made it his life's mission to make me miserable. Growing up, Jake had this knack for getting me into trouble. If something went wrong in the house, it was always, Emily did it. He broke Mom's favorite vase? Must have been me. He took money out of Dad's wallet? Obviously my fault. He'd come up with these wild, detailed lies, and no matter how absurd they sounded, my parents always believed him. It got to a point where I didn't even bother defending myself anymore. What was the point? They never listened. Jake was always just being a kid or didn't mean any harm, while I was labeled as the troublemaker who needed to learn how to behave. But Jake didn't stop at just lying. He made school hell for me too. He spread rumors about me to my classmates, sometimes in ways that were so subtle I didn't even realize it was him at first. I'd notice friends pulling away, acting distant, and then find out weeks later that Jake had told them I said something nasty about them, or that I was too weird to hang out with. By the time I hit middle school, I didn't have many close friends left. I couldn't bring people over to the house because Jake would either humiliate me in front of them or later use whatever he overheard against me. He'd twist my words and make it sound like I was bad-mouthing our parents or being ungrateful. And of course, Mom and Dad believed him every single time. The favoritism was glaringly obvious. For example, every year, Jake got a big birthday party with all his friends, fancy decorations, and even a rented bounce house one time. When it came to my birthday, it was a cake at the dining table and maybe a card if they remembered. One year they forgot entirely. Jake made sure to rub that one in. Guess you're just not that important, he sneered. It's not like I was a perfect child or anything. I wasn't super outgoing. And yeah, I was a bit sensitive. But can you blame me? Growing up in a house where I was constantly put down or ignored took a toll on me. I felt like I was screaming into a void, desperate for someone to notice me, to care. But the only people who seemed to matter in that house were Jake and my parents. And Jake? He reveled in it. He knew he was the favorite, and he used that power against me every chance he got. If I ever dared to call him out or stand up for myself, he'd run to Mom and Dad, spinning some story about how I was being mean to him or starting fights. It didn't matter that he was the instigator. He was the golden child, and I was the problem. I remember one time in high school when I finally thought I'd caught a break. I'd worked up the courage to try out for the school play. I wasn't the lead or anything, but I got a decent role, and for once I was proud of myself. I told my parents about it, hoping maybe they'd come see me perform. Jake immediately jumped in with, "Why would anyone want to watch her embarrass herself on stage?" My mom didn't even defend me. She just shrugged and said, "Maybe next time, Emily." That was the moment I realized they weren't just indifferent. They were actively uninterested in me. Jake wasn't just cruel. He was calculated. He knew exactly how to get under my skin and make me feel small. And the worst part? He never faced any consequences for it. Mom and Dad never called him out or punished him. If anything, they encouraged it by always taking his side. Every day felt like a battle I was destined to lose. I'd try to focus on school or my hobbies, but Jake was always there, lurking in the background, ready to tear me down. And my parents? They didn't care. To them, Jake could do no wrong, and I was just there, a mistake they couldn't undo. And yet, somehow, I survived. Maybe it was stubbornness, or maybe it was the faint hope that one day things would get better. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that you can't force people to love you. You just have to find the strength to walk away, and that's exactly what I did later. By the time I turned 18, I was done, like completely done, with my family. I knew the only way I'd ever have a chance at real happiness was to get out of there. So I put everything I had into school. I wasn't just trying to get good grades. I was fighting for freedom. I worked my butt off to get a scholarship to a college out of state. I applied to every program, wrote essay after essay, and spent hours filling out financial aid forms. The moment I got my acceptance letter from a school in California with a partial scholarship, I cried not because I was sad, but because I finally saw a way out. The day I left for college, I didn't even get so much as a "we'll miss you" from my parents. They helped Jake pack up and move into his fully furnished apartment when he decided to live on his own. Me? I got a pat on the back and a good luck. My mom even had the nerve to say, "Don't forget to call us if you need help," knowing full well they wouldn't lift a finger. Jake stayed in our tiny Illinois hometown. Of course, my parents paid for everything: his rent, his car, even his groceries. Meanwhile, I was on my own. I remember walking into my dorm room, looking around at the bare walls, and realizing this was the first time I was truly free. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Once I left, my parents wasted no time cutting me out of their lives. At first, I tried keeping in touch. I called them a couple of times, but the conversations were short and awkward. They never asked how I was doing or how school was going. They just updated me on Jake's life: how he got a new car, how he was hosting some big party, how he and his girlfriend, Sarah at the time, were getting serious. It didn't take long for me to realize they didn't care about my life at all. So, I stopped calling, and honestly, they didn't seem to notice. Our family group chat became the Jake Show. It was all about his accomplishments, like how he grilled the best steak at a BBQ, or how he was thinking of starting his own business, which never happened. Meanwhile, I was balancing 15 credit hours, 2 part-time jobs, and endless study sessions just to keep my scholarship. There were days when I didn't know how I was going to make it. I'd work late shifts at a campus coffee shop, then stay up until 2 a.m. cramming for exams. I lived on instant ramen and dollar store mac and cheese because that's all I could afford. Some days, I felt like I was barely holding it together, but I refused to call home for help. Not that they would have offered any, but I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of seeing me struggle. Even when things got tough, I couldn't bring myself to regret leaving. My senior year of college was a turning point for me. That's when I met Ethan, the man who would eventually become my husband. I wasn't looking for a relationship at the time. I was too busy trying to survive. But Ethan kind of fell into my life in the best way possible. We met during a group project in one of my classes. He was one of those people who seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, not just for the project, but for who I was as a person. At first, I was hesitant. I wasn't used to people being kind without some ulterior motive, thanks to my family. But Ethan wasn't like that. He was patient and kind, and he made me feel like I was worth something. One of the things that stood out to me the most about Ethan was his family. I'll never forget the first time he invited me to dinner at his parents' house. I was so nervous, but they made me feel welcome from the moment I walked through the door. His mom hugged me like she'd known me forever, and his dad joked about how Ethan never brought anyone home unless they were the real deal. They asked about my life, my classes, and my plans for the future. They listened, like actually listened. It was such a stark contrast to my own family that I didn't know how to react at first. But over time, I started to let my guard down. Ethan's family became the support system I never had. His mom would send me care packages during finals week, filled with snacks and little notes of encouragement. His dad offered to help me fix my car when it broke down, even though he barely knew me at the time. They treated me better in a month than my own parents had my entire life. Graduating college felt like the ultimate victory. My parents didn't come to my graduation, of course, but Ethan and his family were there, cheering me on. After graduation, Ethan and I moved in together. We didn't have much, but we made it work. I got a job in marketing, and he started working as an engineer. We built a life together, piece by piece, and for the first time, I felt like I was where I was supposed to be. My wedding was the final nail in the coffin for me and my family. I think a lot of people have this idea that weddings bring families together, that they're this magical event where even the most strained relationships can heal. Yeah, that wasn't my experience. My wedding didn't bring my family closer. It exposed, actually confirmed, just how little they cared about me. When Ethan proposed, I was over the moon. He popped the question on a quiet hike, just the two of us. It was simple and perfect. Exactly what I wanted. After I got home, I took a picture of the ring and sent it to my family group chat with a little "I said yes" message. I wasn't expecting a parade or anything, but I thought I'd at least get a congrats or some kind of acknowledgement. Instead, nothing. I got left on read. I checked the chat later that night, and I could see they'd all read the message. My mom didn't reply. My dad didn't reply. And Jake? Of course not. I even double-checked to make sure the message was actually sent. It was. They just chose to ignore it. That was the first time I realized they probably weren't going to care about my wedding at all. And I was right. As I started planning, I kept trying to include them. I'd send my mom texts asking for her opinion on things like venues or color schemes. Nothing big, just stuff like, "What do you think of these flowers?" Or, "Do you have any recommendations for a dress shop?" Half the time, she wouldn't reply. The other half, she'd give me these one-word answers like, "nice" or "pretty," which basically screamed, "I don't care." At one point, I even asked if she wanted to come with me to look at dresses. She said she was too busy. Too busy doing what? I have no idea. Watching TV, maybe? So I just stopped sending anything. Meanwhile, Ethan's mom was over the moon. She helped me pick out my dress, organize the guest list, and even spent an entire weekend DIYing centerpieces with me. She made me feel like I actually mattered. Jake, on the other hand, took it a step further. Not only did he not care about my wedding, but he actively tried to sabotage it. My cousin Megan, the only family member I still talk to, and she's now renting a room in my parents' house because her parents are in a different country and were worried about her living on her own. Anyways, later told me how he convinced my parents that I was disrespectful and ungrateful for not involving them enough in the wedding prep. He told them I didn't care about their opinions and that I was intentionally leaving them out of everything. What really pissed me off was that it wasn't true. I tried. I reached out. I asked for their help. They were the ones who didn't care. They were the ones who ignored me. But of course, Jake spun it like I was the bad guy. And my parents, being who they are, were easily convinced. Things escalated when I sent out the wedding invitations. I included my parents and Jake, of course, even though I was starting to wonder why I bothered. A few weeks later, I called my mom to ask if they'd RSVP'd yet because I hadn't heard anything. Her response? "Oh, we haven't decided if we're coming yet. Jake said we should think about it." Think about it? What was there to think about? It was my wedding. I was their daughter. But apparently Jake had been telling them how I didn't deserve their support. He told them I only reached out to them when I wanted something, and that I didn't truly value them as a family. That was rich coming from Jake, who spent his entire life taking from them without giving anything back. He got everything handed to him on a silver platter, but somehow I was the ungrateful one for not worshiping them the way he did. As the wedding got closer, it became clear they weren't coming. My mom stopped responding to my messages altogether, and my dad barely said 2 words to me when I called. Megan tried to convince them to change their minds, but Jake doubled down, telling them they were supposed to be the center of everything. The irony of that statement still makes me laugh. I literally asked them to be part of the process. I wanted them to be involved, but they made it clear over and over again that they didn't want to step in. And now they were twisting it. The wedding day came, and they weren't there. No text, no call, nothing. Just empty seats where my parents and brother should have been. I won't lie, it hurt. Even though I knew not to expect much from them, it still stung to look out into the crowd and not see them there. But Ethan's family? They showed up in full force. His parents, his siblings, his cousins, they were all there, cheering us on and celebrating with us. His mom even gave a little toast during the reception, saying how proud they were to officially welcome me into the family. After the wedding, I decided I was done. I didn't call my parents to ask why they didn't come. I didn't send them pictures or updates. I didn't even bother replying when Jake sent me a snarky text saying, "Hope your big day was worth ignoring your family." I blocked Jake's number after that. I figured there was no point in keeping the lines of communication open when all he ever did was tear me down. If they didn't want to be part of my life, that was their choice. But I wasn't going to keep trying for people who couldn't even bother to show up for me. So, while I was over in California building a life with Ethan, my brother Jake stayed back home, basking in his golden child glory. If you've been keeping up, you already know that my parents worship the ground Jake walks on. That didn't change when he got married. In fact, it only got worse. Jake married Sarah, and my parents went all out for their wedding. I didn't get an invite, not that I'd have gone, but my cousin Megan kept me in the loop. She told me they practically covered everything: the venue, the catering, the flowers, even Sarah's dream dress. Megan said the whole thing probably cost more than what most people spend on a down payment for a house. Speaking of houses, guess who got one of those too? Yep, Jake and Sarah didn't even have to worry about buying their first home because my parents bought it for them. A 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in a nice suburban neighborhood, all fully furnished. Meanwhile, I was over here in California, working 2 jobs just to save up for a decent apartment with Ethan. Megan would call me every once in a while with updates about Jake's charmed life. According to her, my parents were over at his house constantly, doting on him and Sarah like they were royalty. They'd babysit their dog, help with landscaping, and even stock their fridge when Sarah didn't feel like grocery shopping. I'll admit, hearing all that stung a little. Not because I wanted their help, I'd been fine on my own for years, but because it was just another reminder of how differently they treated us. When I got married, they couldn't even bother to send me a text. But for Jake, the sky was the limit. For a while, everything seemed picture perfect for Jake and Sarah. My parents bragged about them to anyone who would listen, acting like they were the epitome of success. Megan told me how they'd gush about how Jake found such a wonderful wife and how they're building such a beautiful life together. But then, things started to shift. After a couple of years, my parents started dropping hints about grandchildren. At first, it was subtle. Little comments about how a baby would make their family complete, or how they couldn't wait to spoil a grandchild. But subtlety isn't really their strong suit, so it quickly escalated. Megan told me my mom became borderline obsessed with the idea of grandkids. She'd bring it up every chance she got, pestering Jake and Sarah about when they were going to start a family. My dad wasn't much better. He'd make comments about continuing the family name, and how it was Jake's responsibility as the eldest son to carry on the legacy. I wasn't surprised, honestly. My parents have always been weirdly traditional, especially when it comes to family stuff. They don't just want grandkids, they want biological grandkids. Adoption? Not an option in their eyes. It had to be blood-related grandchildren, preferably a boy to carry on the name. Jake and Sarah, for their part, tried to dodge the topic for as long as they could. Megan said Sarah would laugh it off or change the subject, while Jake would make vague excuses about not being ready yet. But my parents weren't buying it. They started pushing harder, to the point where it became this constant source of tension. Megan told me about one family dinner, where my mom straight up asked Sarah if she was on birth control and when she planned to stop taking it. Sarah looked mortified, but my mom didn't care. One day, during one of my regular catch-up calls with Megan, she told me that Jake and Sarah had been trying to have kids. They just weren't telling anyone. Yeah, apparently they had been trying for over a year, doing the whole fertility specialist thing, and the news wasn't good. Jake had some kind of condition, Megan didn't know all the details, that made it almost impossible for him to have biological children. Sarah was fine medically. It was all on Jake's side. And here's where it gets messy. Jake and Sarah didn't tell my parents right away. Honestly, I get it. Knowing my mom and dad, they wouldn't have been supportive or understanding. They would have been disappointed, and not the aw shucks kind of disappointed. The kind where they make you feel like you've personally let them down and disgraced the entire family. Jake and Sarah kept it under wraps for a while, but secrets like that don't stay hidden forever, especially in our family. My parents were relentless about the whole grandchild thing. Every time they saw Jake and Sarah, they'd drop comments about when they were going to have kids. Not if, always when. Megan told me it all came to a head during a family dinner. My mom was doing her usual thing, grilling Sarah about babies, saying stuff like, "Oh, you're not getting any younger," and "You should really think about starting now before it's too late." Sarah finally snapped and said something like, "It's not that simple, okay?" That's when the truth came out. She spilled everything. The fertility issues, the specialist visits, all of it. My parents' reaction? About as bad as you'd expect. Megan said they didn't even try to comfort Jake or Sarah. My mom just sat there looking like someone had told her Christmas was canceled. And my dad muttered something about how they should have told them sooner. Real supportive, right? After that, things got weird. My parents didn't come right out and say they were mad at Jake, but you could tell they were. The way Megan described it, it was like a switch flipped. My mom stopped calling Jake every day, and my dad didn't swing by their house as often. They still doted on Sarah, probably because they saw her as their last hope for grandkids. But Jake? Not so much. Megan said my mom started making passive-aggressive comments about adoption, like, well, I guess it's better than nothing. And, it's not the same, though, is it? She'd go on and on about how their friends were all real grandparents with real grandkids. My dad, on the other hand, kept talking about how Jake needed to figure it out. Like, what was he supposed to do? Snap his fingers and magically fix his infertility? Jake, for once in his life, didn't know how to handle the pressure. He'd spent his whole life being the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Now, suddenly, he wasn't living up to their expectations, and it was eating him alive. Megan told me Jake started acting out in ways that weren't like him. He was snapping at Sarah, picking fights over stupid things, and even lashing out at my parents during family gatherings. He'd always been good at staying on their good side, but now he was struggling to keep it together. Sarah wasn't handling it much better. Megan said she was tired of being treated like a baby-making machine. She started avoiding family events altogether, and when she did show up, she barely spoke to anyone. It was obvious she was over it. One night, Megan called me with an update that really drove home how bad things had gotten. Apparently, Jake had a meltdown at another family dinner. Are we noticing a pattern here? My mom had made some comment about how disappointing it was that she might never have biological grandkids, and Jake just lost it. He told them they were being selfish, and that this wasn't something he could control. Megan said my parents were stunned. My mom tried to guilt trip him, saying stuff like, "We're only thinking about the family," and, "Do you know how much this means to us?" But Jake wasn't having it. He stormed out, and Sarah followed him. Here's the thing. Part of me felt bad for Jake. Infertility isn't something anyone chooses, and the way my parents reacted was awful. But another part of me? I couldn't help but think he was finally getting a taste of what it was like to be on the other side of their impossible expectations. He'd never had to deal with their disapproval or their guilt trips, because he could do no wrong in their eyes. Now, he was learning what it felt like to not measure up, and it was clearly breaking him. Megan told me my parents started putting more pressure on Sarah after that. They were still hung up on the idea of biological grandkids, and they didn't care how it happened. They kept pushing for solutions that were completely unrealistic, like expensive treatments that Jake and Sarah couldn't afford without help. The whole thing became this toxic cycle. My parents would pressure Jake and Sarah, they'd push back, and then my parents would double down. It was like no one could admit that maybe, just maybe, things weren't going to turn out the way they wanted. I felt bad for Sarah. She didn't sign up for this level of crazy when she married Jake. On the other hand, I couldn't feel too sorry for him. After a while, my parents were furious and threatened to cut Jake off financially unless he could fix the situation. And of course, Jake can't afford living without their help. He's been almost completely dependent on them. And because my parents are all about bloodlines and family legacy, their brilliant solution was for Jake to come crawling to me. They wanted him to convince me to give my unborn baby their last name. Not just my baby, their legacy. The audacity, right? Megan called me one night, and I could hear the tension in her voice. "Emily," she said, "Jake's desperate. They're putting so much pressure on him, and now he's coming for you. Be careful." Sure enough, a couple of days later, Jake showed up unannounced at my house in California. Let me tell you, seeing him on my doorstep was surreal. He looked nothing like the smug, arrogant brother I remembered. Instead, he looked tired and defeated, like life had finally smacked him in the face. I let him in, mostly because I wanted to hear what he had to say. He started rambling right away, launching into this sob story about how hard things had been since our parents found out about his infertility. He said they'd been relentless, blaming him for ruining their dreams of grandkids and threatening to cut him off if he didn't make it right. Jake tried to blame everything, his behavior growing up, his role in turning my parents against me, on stress. He said he'd been under so much pressure to be the perfect son that he didn't know how to handle it. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said, wiping his eyes dramatically. "I just didn't know how else to deal with everything. Honestly, I wasn't buying it. Jake's actions weren't about stress. They were about control. He'd spent years making my life hell because he could, because he knew our parents would always take his side. And now he wanted me to swoop in and save him? Yeah, no. I let him talk until he finally got to the real reason he was there. "Emily," he said, "I need your help. Mom and Dad are serious about cutting me off unless I can fix this. They need the family name to continue, and they think your baby is the answer. Please, just give the baby our last name. It's the only way to save our family." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Like actually laughed out loud. "Jake," I said, "you've got to be kidding me. After everything you did to me, you want me to hand over my child to fix your mess? Not a chance. Jake looked stunned, like he genuinely thought I'd say yes. He tried to guilt trip me, accusing me of being petty and holding grudges. This isn't about the past, I told him. This is about protecting my family. My kids will have nothing to do with the people who treated me like I didn't matter. He kept pushing, saying how I was ruining his life by refusing to help him. He even tried to play the victim, saying he didn't deserve to be punished for something he couldn't control. Emily, he said, if they cut me off, I'll lose everything. That's when I lost my patience. Jake, I said, you've spent your whole life taking from me, my peace, my friends, even my parents' attention. And now you want to take from my kids? Absolutely not. If they cut you off, that's on them, not me. Maybe it's time you learned what it's like to stand on your own 2 feet. Jake stormed out after that, slamming the door behind him. I felt a mix of emotions, anger, relief, and a weird sense of closure. For the first time, I stood up to him and didn't let him manipulate me. It felt good. A few days later, Megan called me with an update. Apparently, my parents followed through on their threat and cut Jake off financially. They stopped paying for his house, his car, and everything else they'd been covering for him. Megan said Jake and Sarah were struggling to adjust to life without my parents' endless support. Sarah, who'd been used to living a cushy life, wasn't happy. Megan said she overheard Sarah complaining about how unfair it was that Jake couldn't just fix things with me. I almost felt bad for her, but then I remembered how she'd gone along with my parents' toxic behavior for years. So, after Jake failed to get me to cave, my parents decided to step in themselves. I wasn't exactly surprised. It started with a phone call from my mom. I hadn't heard from her in years, literally years. So seeing her name pop up on my screen was jarring, to say the least. At first, I thought about ignoring it, but I was curious to see what she had to say. I picked up, and she immediately launched into a rehearsed-sounding apology. Emily, she said, her voice dripping with this faux sweetness that I hadn't heard since I was a kid. I just wanted to say how sorry I am for everything. We've been thinking about you so much, and we miss you. Miss me? Since when? She kept going, trying to make it sound like they'd had this big epiphany about how they'd treated me. I know we made mistakes, she said, but we're family, and I think it's time we start fresh. I cut her off. Is this about Jake? There was a long pause on the other end. She clearly hadn't expected me to be so direct. Well, yes, she admitted, her tone shifting. But it's not just about him. It's about the family. We need to come together, Emily. We've all been through so much. And then she started with the guilt trips. You know how much this means to your father and me. All we want is to make things right. Your baby could bring this family back together. Don't you think it's time we put the past behind us? I could feel my blood boiling. Put the past behind us, I said. You mean the past where you treated me like I didn't exist? The past where you gave Jake everything and left me with nothing? That past? She tried to backpedal, but I wasn't having it. I told her I wasn't interested in letting them use my child to fix their mistakes. She started crying, saying how much it hurt her to hear me talk that way, but I stood my ground. A few days later, my dad called. If my mom's tactic was guilt, my dad's was anger. He started off by saying how disappointed he was in me for being so selfish. He told me I was tearing the family apart, and that I needed to grow up and think about the bigger picture. I let him rant for a while before cutting in. Dad, let me make one thing clear. My baby is not your second chance. If you're so worried about the family name, maybe you should have thought about that earlier. Way earlier. He didn't have much to say after that, but he tried one last jab. You know, Emily, we only want what's best for the family. If you can't see that, then I don't know what else to say. I had enough and blocked them everywhere, and I haven't heard from them since. Meanwhile, I'm focusing on my life and what's coming. Ethan and I will be raising our kids in a loving, healthy environment, something I never had growing up. Megan and Ethan's family have become my support system, and I couldn't be more grateful for them. I've thought a lot about whether I should feel guilty for cutting off my family, especially Jake. But every time I think about it, I come back to the same conclusion. I don't owe them anything. They made their choices, and now they're dealing with the consequences. Jake and my parents can keep playing their games, but I'm done. I'm done being the scapegoat, the afterthought, the one who always had to bend to make them happy. I'm building a new life, one filled with love, respect, and the kind of family I always wanted, but never had. Thanks for sticking with me through this story, Reddit. It's been a wild ride, but sharing it has been surprisingly cathartic. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away from the people who hurt you, no matter who they are. Stay out of this family's sight. Your place is in the trash, loser. My sister's husband sneered at her $34,700 wedding, funded entirely by me. I smiled and said, then go beg that useless Derek for help, as I repossessed the car and cut off the family trust. Their finances collapsed almost overnight. Hey, Reddit, this is a long one, but trust me, it gets wild. This happened about 10 months ago, and I'm still processing how completely I destroyed my own family financially. But looking back, they absolutely deserved everything they got. Some background on me. I, 29 male, been working construction since I was 18. Started as a general laborer making minimum wage, worked my way up, got my contractor's license, and now I run my own crew doing commercial renovations. Last year I cleared about $165,000, which isn't bad for a guy who never went to college. I live alone in a house I bought and renovated myself. Nothing fancy, but it's mine and completely paid off. My sister Jessica is 26 and has been a professional user her entire adult life. She's attractive, I'll give her that, but has the work ethic of a spoiled house cat and thinks the world owes her everything because she knows how to do her makeup and take selfies. She's bounced between retail jobs, waitressing, and trying to become an influencer, where she posts pictures, hoping some rich guy will notice her. Our parents divorced when I was 15, and Jessica was 12. Dad remarried and basically started a new family. Mom never recovered emotionally, and spent the next decade treating Jessica like her precious princess while expecting me to be the man of the house. When I moved out at 18, Mom constantly guilt-tripped me about abandoning the family, while Jessica got to live rent-free doing whatever she wanted. Fast forward to last year when Jessica calls me crying because she's getting evicted again. Third time in 2 years. I'd already bailed her out twice before, once for $2,600 and once for $1,400. This time she needed $3,100 for back rent plus deposits for a new place. Please, Ryan, I've learned my lesson this time. I got a new job at this boutique, and they're promoting me to assistant manager soon. I'll pay you back in 3 months, I promise. Yeah, sure. But like an idiot, I gave her the money because family, right? Did I mention she never paid me back from the previous 2 times either? So she moves into this new apartment, and suddenly she's posting pictures of herself in designer clothes, going to expensive restaurants, getting her nails done weekly. When I asked about repayment, she always had excuses. I had to buy work clothes, or my car needed repairs, or my personal favorite. I thought you said it was a gift. Then in October, she calls with big news. She's engaged to this guy Derek, who she's been dating for maybe 4 months. Derek's 32, works in finance, which I later discovered means he sells insurance, drives a leased BMW, and thinks he's successful because he wears suits to work. We're having the wedding in June at Riverside Country Club. It's going to be absolutely perfect. Riverside Country Club, the most expensive venue in our city, where tech executives and lawyers get married. I immediately knew this would be a financial disaster. How much is this costing? I asked. Well, that's what I wanted to discuss with you. Of course it was. She launches into this sob story about how Derek's parents are contributing $14,000, but they need another $26,000 to make it the dream wedding she's always wanted. Mom can only contribute $4,500 because she's on a fixed income, so we need $21,500 more, and Derek's maxed out his credit cards on the engagement ring and wedding planning. Could you maybe help us out? As a wedding gift? $21,000. More than most people make in 6 months. For one single day. Jessica, that's a lot of money. Why don't you just have a smaller wedding? Wrong thing to say. She immediately started crying about how this was the most important day of her life, how she dreamed about this since she was little, how Derek's ex-girlfriend had a huge wedding and she couldn't look cheap in comparison. Please, Ryan, you're doing so well with your business. This would mean everything to me. I promise I'll pay you back. The same promise she'd made 3 times before and never kept. But here's the thing. I was stupid enough to think maybe marriage would finally teach her responsibility, maybe having a husband would settle her down. And honestly, I had the money. Business was excellent. I didn't have major expenses coming up, and she was my sister. So I agreed to help. Biggest mistake of my life. The moment I agreed to fund the wedding, Jessica transformed into a complete nightmare. Not gradually, literally overnight she became this entitled monster who treated my money like her personal trust fund. First thing she did was text me a list. Not a thank you so much, or I really appreciate this. Just a detailed list of vendors with amounts I needed to pay and deadlines. Venue final payment, $17,200. Due February 15th. Photography package, $3,900, due March 1st. Catering upgrade, $3,600, due March 15th. Wedding dress alterations, $580, due April 1st. Flowers, $1,950, due May 1st. She'd already committed to all of this without asking me. Just assumed I'd pay whatever she spent. When I called her about it, she was like, "Oh, Derek and I figured since you were being so generous, we might as well make it really special. Jessica, you said you needed $21,500. This adds up to over $27,000. Well, yeah, but we decided to upgrade some things. Don't worry. Derek's getting a bonus at work in March. That'll cover the difference." Spoiler alert, there was no bonus. But it gets worse. Over the next few months, she kept hitting me up for additional money. Her car needed new tires, $750. She needed a bridesmaid dress for her friend's wedding, $280. She wanted to surprise Derek with a weekend trip for his birthday, $550. Always with the same line. "I'll pay you back when Derek gets his bonus, chalk promotion, chalk commission check." The worst part was her attitude toward me. Like I was her personal bank instead of her brother funding her entire lifestyle. She'd call and immediately start discussing what she needed money for. No, "how are you?" or "how's work?" Just straight to business. One time I was having a terrible week. Lost a major contract because the client was difficult. One of my workers got injured. Truck needed expensive repairs. When Jessica called asking for another $380 for wedding favors, I mentioned I was stressed about work and money was tight that month. Her response? "Well, you committed to paying for my wedding, so you can't back out now. Besides, your problems aren't my problem." Her problems weren't my problem either. But here I was funding everything. Derek wasn't much better. Dude acted like I should be grateful for the opportunity to fund his wedding. Never said thank you, never offered to contribute, just treated it like I owed them something. The few times I was around him, he'd make comments about how generous I was being, but in this sarcastic way like he thought I was showing off. Around April, things got really problematic. Derek lost his job. Not laid off, not downsized, terminated for not meeting sales targets. Suddenly, all those bonus checks and commission payments Jessica kept promising weren't coming. Did they scale back the wedding? Did they consider postponing until they were financially stable? Of course not. "Don't worry," Jessica told me. "Derek's already interviewing for better positions. He'll probably make even more money at the next job." Meanwhile, she kept spending like nothing had changed. New outfits for wedding events, expensive dinners out, a $1,100 hair and makeup trial, because the first one didn't capture her vision. By May, I'd paid out over $29,000, and she was still requesting more. The final straw was when she called wanting money for a bachelorette party in Miami. "It's only going to be like $2,300 for my share. Brittany's planning everything, and she booked this amazing house with a pool, and we're going to get bottle service at the clubs." Jessica, Derek doesn't even have a job right now. Don't you think a $2,300 party is excessive? Oh my goodness, Ryan, you're being so negative. This is supposed to be the best time of my life. Why are you trying to ruin it? That's when it really hit me. She didn't see this as my money. In her mind, I was just there to make her dreams come true, and any hesitation was me being selfish and mean. I paid for the bachelorette party, because I'm an idiot who thought family meant something. But I was starting to document everything. Every receipt, every bank transfer, every text message where she promised repayment. Something told me I was going to need proof later. Thank goodness I did. June 15th, the day of Jessica's dream wedding, that had cost me over $32,000 by the final count. I put on my best suit, bought an expensive bottle of champagne as an additional gift, and showed up ready to support my sister on her big day. The venue was absolutely gorgeous, I'll admit. Riverside Country Club overlooking the water, perfect weather, flowers everywhere. Must have looked incredible on Instagram. Everything I'd paid for looked exactly like the magazine pictures Jessica had been obsessing over for months. But something felt wrong from the start. I arrived early to help with setup, because despite funding everything, I was apparently also expected to provide free labor, and the wedding coordinator asked me where I was sitting. "I'm Ryan, Jessica's brother," I told her. She checked her list, frowned, checked again. "I don't see your name here. Let me contact the bride." 20 minutes later, Jessica comes rushing over in her robe with her hair half done, looking annoyed that she had to deal with this. "Oh right, Ryan. We had to make some changes to the seating chart last week. Derek's boss and his wife are coming, so we needed to make room at the family table. So where am I sitting?" She handed me a small card. Table 8. I looked at the seating chart. Table 8 was in the back corner, behind a decorative pillar, with people I'd never met in my life. Meanwhile, Derek's co-workers, who I'd never seen before, were at table 2, right up front. Jessica, I paid for this entire wedding. I think I deserve better than the back corner. Don't be dramatic, Ryan. It's just for dinner. You'll barely notice. Just for dinner. At the wedding, I'd paid $32,000 for, but I didn't want to cause drama, so I agreed and went to help move chairs or whatever task they had for me next. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Jessica looked stunning. Derek cleaned up nicely. They said their vows, everyone cried, the usual stuff. I was genuinely happy for her in that moment, thinking maybe this was all worth it if it made her happy. Then came the reception. I'm sitting at table 8 with Derek's cousin's children and some random college friends of Jessica's, watching everyone else enjoy themselves at their properly placed tables. The food was excellent. It should be for $3,600. The band was great, another $2,100, and the flowers looked perfect, that $1,950 again. During the speeches, Derek got up and thanked everyone who made this magical day possible. He thanked his parents for their generous contribution, thanked the wedding party for their support, thanked his boss for giving him time off, the same boss who terminated him 2 months earlier, but apparently hired him back. Even thanked the caterers. Never mentioned me once. Not a single word about the guy who paid for 85% of their wedding. After dinner, I was standing by the bar when Derek approached. He'd been celebrating since the ceremony and was feeling chatty. Great party, right? He said, putting his arm around my shoulder like we were best friends. Yeah, it turned out nice, I replied. You know what's funny? He said, getting closer and lowering his voice. Jessica was so worried about money for this wedding, but it all worked out. Her sucker brother came through. He laughed like he'd just told the funniest joke in the world. What did you just say? Oh, come on, don't be sensitive. We all know you were trying to buy your way into being important. Mission accomplished, right? You got to feel like a big shot for a few months. I stared at him for a long moment, waiting for him to say he was joking or that he'd misspoken. But he just kept smiling that smug smile. Derek, I paid for this entire wedding. And we're very grateful, he said, but his tone was mocking. Don't worry, we'll send you a nice thank you card. That's when Jessica appeared, looking gorgeous in her $2,200 dress, that I'd paid for, and immediately noticed the tension. What's going on? She asked. Your husband just called me a sucker for paying for your wedding, I said. I waited for her to get angry at him, to defend me, to show some appreciation for everything I'd done. Instead, she laughed. Oh, Derek, you're terrible, she said, but she was still laughing. Don't mind him, Ryan. He's had too much champagne. So you think it's funny too? I think you're being way too serious, she said. It's my wedding day. Can we not do this right now? That was it. That was the moment I realized I'd been played completely. To them, I wasn't family who'd made sacrifices to help. I was just some pathetic loser who'd thrown money at them, so they let me hang around. I didn't make a scene, didn't yell or cause drama. I just said, congratulations on your marriage, and walked out. But as I was leaving, I heard Derek say to someone behind me, don't worry about him, he'll get over it. He needs us more than we need him. That's when I decided they were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. I went home and sat in my kitchen, staring at a folder full of receipts and bank statements. Every payment I'd made for the wedding, every loan I'd given Jessica over the years, every time she'd promised repayment and didn't follow through. The numbers were staggering. Wedding expenses, $32,247. Previous loans never repaid, $7,100. Various emergencies over the years, $3,900. Total, $43,247. $43,000. That's a new truck, a down payment on rental property, more than some people make in a year. And I just handed it over to someone who thought I was a sucker. My phone was blowing up with messages from the wedding. Mom asking where I went, Jessica wanting to know why I stormed out, Derek sending some ridiculous non-apology about how he was just joking around. I ignored all of them and started doing research. See, when you own a construction business, you learn about contracts, liens, and legal ways to recover money from people who think they can cheat you. I'd never had to use those skills on family before, but desperate times call for desperate measures. I spent the weekend going through everything. Jessica had signed a promissory note for the first $2,600 I'd loaned her. My lawyer had insisted on it after I got burned by a client. The other loans were documented in text messages, where she'd promised repayment. The wedding expenses were trickier, since I'd positioned them as a gift, but I had evidence that it was supposed to be a loan based on her repeated promises to repay me. More importantly, I started looking into Derek's financial situation. Remember how he'd been terminated and then supposedly rehired? Yeah, that was complete nonsense. I discovered through a contact who works in commercial real estate that Derek's new job was actually a commission-only insurance sales position with no base salary. Dude was basically unemployed but lying about it to maintain appearances. They were living in an apartment they couldn't afford, driving cars they couldn't afford, and their honeymoon to Europe, another $7,500, was being funded entirely by credit cards. Monday morning, I got a call from Jessica. Ryan, I don't understand why you left early. People were asking where you were. Did you tell them I was the sucker who paid for the wedding? Oh my goodness, Derek had too much to drink. He didn't mean anything by it. What about you laughing about it? Silence for a moment. Then, I think you're being really unfair. I've been nothing but grateful for everything you've done. When have you ever said thank you? Another pause. I say thank you all the time. No, Jessica, you don't. You treat me like a bank. You call when you need money and ignore me the rest of the time. That's not true. When's the last time you asked how I was doing? When's the last time you showed any interest in my life that didn't involve me giving you money? She couldn't answer that because we both knew the truth. Look, she said finally, I'm sorry if you feel unappreciated, but you can't just expect me to be grateful forever for something you chose to do. Something I chose to do, not something she'd begged me for while crying about how desperate she was. You're right, I said. I chose to help you, and now I'm choosing to stop. What do you mean? I mean I want my money back. All of it. She laughed like I'd told a joke. Ryan, you can't be serious. That money was a gift. No, it was a loan. You promised to pay me back multiple times. I have the text messages. I can't pay you back right now. We just spent everything on the wedding and honeymoon. Then you better figure it out. I hung up and immediately drove to my lawyer's office. My lawyer is this experienced guy who's helped me with business contracts and property deals for years. When I showed him all the documentation I had, he got this satisfied expression on his face. Ryan, your sister is in serious trouble, he said. The promissory note alone is enough to put a lien on any property she owns. The text messages about paying you back make the wedding expenses recoverable as loans, not gifts. And if she defaults, we can garnish her wages. How long does this process take? I can file the paperwork this week. She'll have 30 days to respond or pay up. Do it! 3 days later, Jessica called me screaming. What the heck, Ryan? A process server just came to my apartment. I told you I wanted my money back. I can't pay you $43,000. We don't have that kind of money. Should have thought about that before you called me a sucker. I never called you that. You laughed when Derek did. Same thing. I could hear Derek in the background yelling something about how I was out of my mind and how they were going to sue me for harassment. Good luck with that, I said. Your husband doesn't even have a real job. That's when Jessica really lost it. Started screaming about how I was destroying her marriage, how I was a bitter loser who couldn't stand to see her happy, how she was going to tell everyone what a psycho I was. Tell whoever you want, I said. Just make sure you also tell them how much money you owe me. I hung up and blocked her number. The next few weeks were chaos. Mom called crying about how I was tearing the family apart over money. I reminded her that Jessica had been taking money from me for years and never paying it back. But apparently that didn't matter, because family helps family. Then where was the family when I was working 70-hour weeks to build my business? I asked. Where was the family when I needed help? That's different, Mom said. You're successful now. I'm successful because I worked for it, not because someone handed it to me. She hung up on me. Jessica tried reaching out through mutual friends, painting me as this obsessive, greedy person who was demanding money back from a wedding gift. But I'd anticipated this and had already shown the promissory notes and text messages to a few key people. Hard to play victim when there's written proof that you borrowed money and never paid it back. The real fun started when Derek's parents discovered their son had been lying about his job. Turns out they'd been bragging to their friends about their successful new son-in-law and his finance career. When word got around that he was actually unemployed and getting sued for $43,000, they were mortified. Jessica called me from her mother-in-law's phone, since I'd blocked her, begging me to work something out. We can pay you back in installments, she said. Like $500 a month. $500 a month for 86 months? That's over 7 years, Jessica. We'll pay interest. I don't want installments. I want my money back now. We don't have it. Then sell something. Downsize. Get real jobs. Figure it out. The court date was set for 6 weeks after I filed. During that time, Jessica and Derek tried everything to avoid paying. They claimed the wedding expenses were gifts, Text messages proved otherwise. They said I was lying about the amounts. Bank records proved otherwise. They even tried to argue that I could afford to lose the money, so it didn't matter, which isn't how loans work. Their lawyer, some budget attorney they found online, basically told them they were in serious trouble and should try to settle. That's when things got really interesting. 2 weeks before the court date, Derek's insurance sales job fell through. Turns out when you have no experience and a pending lawsuit, companies don't want to hire you for commission-only positions that require your own leads and networking. Jessica, meanwhile, had been working part-time at a boutique making maybe $1,100 a month. Nowhere near enough to cover their $2,300 rent, car payments, credit cards, and basic living expenses. I heard through the grapevine, Mom, who couldn't help herself from keeping me updated despite being mad at me, that they'd asked Derek's parents for help. His parents offered to let them move in temporarily, but weren't willing to pay their debts. Smart people. Then Jessica tried a different approach. She showed up at my job site one afternoon while I was finishing up a bathroom renovation for a high-end client. "Ryan, please, we need to talk," she said. I was not happy about her bringing drama to my workplace, but I stepped outside to avoid making a scene in front of my client. "You've got 5 minutes," I said. "Look, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. Derek was completely out of line at the wedding, and I should have stood up for you." Finally, something resembling an apology. "But please," she continued, "can't we work something out? I'll pay you back, I swear. It might take a while, but I'll get a better job. Derek's looking for work. We'll make it happen. You've made that promise before, Jessica. Multiple times. This is different. I understand now how much I've taken advantage of you. I was spoiled and selfish, and I'm sorry." She was crying real tears, looking genuinely remorseful. For a moment, I almost felt bad for her. "If I drop the lawsuit," I said, "what guarantee do I have that you'll actually pay me back this time? I'll sign whatever you want. Legal documents, payment schedules, whatever makes you feel secure." I thought about it for a minute. Maybe she really had learned her lesson. Maybe getting sued had scared her enough to take this seriously. "I want $5,000 by the end of the month as a good faith payment," I said. "Then $2,000 a month after that until it's paid off, all documented legally." Her face fell. "Ryan, we don't have $5,000. We barely have $500. "Then get it. Sell your jewelry, sell Derek's BMW, get a loan from someone else. Figure it out. You know we can't get approved for a loan with our credit. Not my problem. What if we could do $1,000 upfront and then $1,500 a month? Jessica, you make $1,100 a month and Derek makes nothing. Where exactly is this $1,500 going to come from?" She started crying harder. "I don't know. But please don't take this to court. It'll ruin our credit. Derek won't be able to get a good job. We'll lose our apartment." "Maybe you should have thought about that before you spent money you didn't have on a wedding you couldn't afford." That's when the real Jessica came back out. "You're being completely vindictive," she screamed. "You have plenty of money. This won't even hurt you." "It's not about the money anymore, Jessica. It's about the principle. Forget your principles. You're destroying my life over something that doesn't even matter to you. If it doesn't matter, then pay me back." She stormed off, but not before yelling loud enough for my client to hear. "I hope you're happy when I'm living on the street." My client came out as Jessica was driving away. "Friend of yours?" she asked with a raised eyebrow. "Sister?" I said. "Ah," she nodded knowingly. "The expensive kind." I finished the job, but word got around pretty quickly about the scene Jessica had caused. Small town, people talk. Within a week, everyone in my professional network knew that my sister owed me $43,000 and was trying to avoid paying it back. The court date arrived. Jessica and Derek showed up with their discount lawyer looking like they were attending a funeral. Their strategy was basically to throw themselves on the mercy of the court and hope the judge would feel sorry for them. Didn't work. The judge took one look at the evidence, the promissory note, the text messages, the bank records, and ruled in my favor for the full amount plus court costs and interest. Total judgment, $46,800. Jessica burst into tears in the courtroom. Derek just sat there looking defeated. "Your Honor," their lawyer said, "my clients would like to request a payment plan. They can work that out with the plaintiff," the judge said. Next case. Outside the courthouse, Jessica was sobbing, while Derek paced around looking like he wanted to punch something. "You happy now?" Derek asked me. "You've officially ruined our lives." "No," I said. "You ruined your own lives by spending money you didn't have and then treating me like garbage when I tried to help." "We'll appeal this," he said. "With what money?" I asked. "You can't even afford the lawyer you have." That's when I played my final card. "By the way," I told Jessica, "since you can't pay the judgment, I'll be placing liens on any assets you own. That includes your car, any bank accounts, and future wages. Oh, and Derek, good luck getting hired anywhere with a $46,800 judgment on your credit report. I walked away while they were still processing what I'd just said. The best part? I wasn't even done yet. 3 months after the court judgment, Jessica and Derek's world had completely collapsed. Derek couldn't get hired anywhere decent because the background check always showed the judgment. Jessica had been forced to quit her boutique job and take a position at a call center that paid $10 an hour because I'd garnished her wages at the boutique. They'd lost their apartment and moved in with Derek's parents, which lasted exactly 2 weeks before his dad kicked them out. Apparently, Derek and his father got into a screaming match about financial responsibility and making better choices. Since then, they'd been staying in a studio apartment in the worst part of town, driving a beat-up Honda Civic they'd bought for $2,800 after I had Derek's BMW repossessed to satisfy part of the judgment. Mom had tried to guilt me into dropping the whole thing multiple times, but I stood firm. They made their choices, I kept telling her. Now they have to live with the consequences. The turning point came on a Tuesday in October. I was at home watching the game when someone started pounding on my door like the house was on fire. I looked through the peephole and saw Jessica standing there in clothes I recognized from high school, looking like she hadn't slept in days. I opened the door and she immediately collapsed into tears. "Ryan, please, I'm begging you. We'll lose everything if you don't help us." "What are you talking about? Derek's dad co-signed our apartment lease. If we get evicted, it'll destroy his credit too, and he's threatening to sue us for damages. We need $2,600 by Friday or we're out." I let her in because she looked genuinely desperate. Her hair was unwashed, she'd lost probably 20 pounds, and she had dark circles under her eyes like she'd been crying for weeks. "Jessica, you owe me almost $47,000. Why would I give you more money?" "Because I'm your sister," she wailed. "Because I'm sorry. Because I've learned my lesson. You said that before. This is different. I know how badly I messed up. I know I was a terrible sister. And I took advantage of you, and I treated you like garbage." She was sobbing so hard she could barely speak. "Please, Ryan. Derek and I are talking about divorce. We can't handle the stress anymore. We fight about money every single day. I've lost all my friends because I can't afford to go out. I'm working at a call center getting yelled at by strangers for $10 an hour. My life is completely ruined." For the first time since this whole thing started, I actually felt a little sorry for her. She looked broken in a way I'd never seen before. "Where's Derek?" I asked. He's at his friend's place. We had a fight yesterday and he said he couldn't deal with this anymore. He said marrying me was the biggest mistake of his life. That hit different. Whatever I thought about Derek, hearing that your husband regrets marrying you has got to hurt. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Drop the judgment," she said immediately. "Please. I know I owe you the money, and I swear I'll pay you back somehow. But having that hanging over us is making it impossible to get jobs or rent apartments or do anything. Derek's talking about filing bankruptcy just to get out from under it. And why would I do that? Because..." She struggled for words. "Because I'm begging you. Because I'm admitting you were right about everything. Because I'm promising to be a better sister if you give me this chance." I sat there looking at her for a long moment. Part of me felt vindicated. She was finally admitting everything I'd said about her being selfish and entitled. But another part of me felt like maybe I'd made my point, and it was time to ease up. "Here's the deal," I said finally. "I'll drop the judgment, but you have to agree to some conditions." Her face lit up with hope. "Anything, whatever you want. First, you pay me back $500 a month starting immediately. Not $200. Not when you can afford it. $500 every month on the same date." "Okay. Yes." "Second, Derek gets a real job with a steady paycheck within 60 days. Not this commission stuff. I'll make sure he does. Third, no more asking me for money. Ever. For any reason. Emergency, non-emergency, doesn't matter. You figure it out on your own. I understand. And fourth," I said, "you apologize to me publicly. Post on Facebook, Instagram, wherever. Tell everyone exactly what happened and how you were wrong." She hesitated at that one. "Ryan, that's really embarrassing." "Not as embarrassing as getting evicted because you can't afford rent." "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll do it. And Jessica, if you break any of these conditions, the judgment goes back into effect immediately, and I'll pursue collection twice as hard as before." "I won't break them," she said. "I promise." 2 days later, she posted a long message on social media that basically said everything I'd wanted to hear for years. How she'd taken advantage of my generosity, how she'd been spoiled and entitled, how she was sorry for treating me badly and was committed to making things right. Derek found a job at a manufacturing plant working second shift for $15 an hour. Not glamorous, but steady income. Jessica picked up a second job waitressing on weekends. They've been paying me back for 6 months now. Haven't missed a payment yet. Derek's been polite the few times I've seen him, and Jessica actually asks about my life now instead of just talking about herself. Are we close like we used to be? Will I ever fully trust her again? Probably not, but she learned a very expensive lesson about biting the hand that feeds you, and I got my money back. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes you have to be willing to burn bridges to teach people respect. Family doesn't give you the right to treat people terribly, just because you know they love you. Best $47,000 lesson I ever taught. For a very long time. I have always known that my parents love my older sister Vicky more than me. She was the planned child while I was the result of an accidental pregnancy. Just 10 months later, they probably didn't even want me, but decided to keep the pregnancy anyway. My mother's parents had passed away before I was even born, but my dad's parents were very much alive, so they took on a significant role in my upbringing. Grandma and Grandpa were the constants in my life, providing the love and support that I often felt lacking from my own parents. I remember so many instances when my parents would leave me behind with my grandparents and only take my sister for trips. When I was young, I didn't mind because it was fun living with my grandparents. But as I started to grow up, like when I was 6 or 7 years old, I realized just how unfair this was. But my problem wasn't just with my parents. It was also with my sister, Vicky. While I harbored no ill will towards Vicky, I couldn't help but feel like an unwanted addition to the family. She knew that as well, and made me feel like a stranger every day in my own home. She would always compete with me for everything, be it about grades, attention from our parents, or even the smallest accomplishments. It felt like a constant battle for validation. And I was always on the losing end because my parents preferred to always. As a result, I would feel really inferior and we never quite saw eye to eye. Our relationship seemed more like a perpetual contest, with her consistently coming out on top. On one occasion, she wanted to be friends with a group of girls, but because she was nerdy, she was afraid to approach them. One of the girls and I had art classes today, so she introduced me to the rest of the group, and we all would hang out together. Vicky was so jealous of this that she made my parents talk to me about including, also whenever I was hanging out with them. I tried to fight, but my mother called me selfish while my dad said she was my sister and I should look after her. Begrudgingly, I agreed and introduced Vicky to the rest of the girls. Now, Vicky doesn't really have a lot of friends, so she can come off as overenthusiastic, so she would constantly try to impress the girls in our group, often coming across as intrusive. Despite her efforts, she struggled to find her place among them, and the awkward tension between Vicky and the other girls was always palpable. For example, one of the girls had a crush on a guy, so Vicky took it upon herself to approach the guy and let him know that the girl liked him. He laughed because he was not interested, and went and told everyone about it, which embarrassed the girl. After this, the girls told me very firmly that they didn't want me to bring Vicky with me to our hangouts, so I agreed. However, Vicky wasn't having it. She threw a tantrum when she found out that the girls wanted nothing to do with her and went to our parents insisting that I should not hang out with these mean girls either, since I was her sister and I should stand up for her. I refused and told her that it was her own fault, that they didn't want to be friends with her. But my parents, as usual, supported her. They lectured me about how Vicky had no ill intentions and that I should try to convince the girls to forgive Vicky. But if they didn't, then I should cut them off also. I refused and put my foot down. I liked hanging out with them, and unlike Vicky, I wasn't going to jeopardize my friendship in any way. I told my parents that I had enough, and it wasn't up to me to find friends for Vicky. My parents were pissed and gave me the silent treatment for weeks, but I'm glad I stuck to my guns. This group of girls has continued to be my friends till today, and are basically like my sisters. I have cried with them, laughed with them, shared some of the most meaningful moments of my life. However, at that time it was really hard for me to stand firm in my decision. There were moments when doubt crept in, when I questioned whether I had made the right choice in prioritizing my own happiness over what they wanted. This was not the only reason Vicky grew to hate me. There was also another incident of a boy. She had a crush on a guy and I have no idea about him. He and I would sit together for some classes because we were friends. He tried to ask me out for junior prom, but I declined politely, since I was already going with someone I liked. Later, when Vicky found out, she made a hue and cry about it, telling my parents how I always take things she wants, and that I was knowingly flirting with the guy for months. She called me a bunch of nasty words, which no one should say to their own sister, and told my parents how she wished I was not her sister. My mother sided with her, telling me how it was wrong of me and that as a sister, I should respect girls' code. I tried telling them that I wasn't even interested in the guy and had declined his invitation, so she was free to ask him if she wanted, but Vicky refused to let it go. Looking back, I think she knew the guy would have rejected her anyway, so she just wanted to take her frustration out on me since he asked me instead of her. Once my dad took me out for ice cream, telling me that he wanted to spend some father-daughter time with me now. This never happened, so I was really pleased. However, he started asking me a bunch of questions like if me and my boyfriend were being careful, if my boyfriend came from a good family, or if my boyfriend and I ever did drugs. I was taken aback by his line of questioning and asked him what he meant by all this. This is when my dad revealed that Vicky had been making up stories and telling my parents for months that I was doing drugs and drinking alcohol with my boyfriend. This was a complete lie, and I showed my dad my phone for him to verify that Vicky was lying. Later, when my dad confronted her about all the lies, she tried to justify that no one our age just hangs out with a guy and that I was hiding things from everyone. I was so pissed that I yelled at her for trying to make unnecessary drama and told her that it wasn't my fault that she had no one to date, but that she needed to keep her nose out of my business. Vicky didn't like it and punched me. This happened out of nowhere since he had never been physically violent before. My nose started bleeding as I fell down on the ground, clutching my face in pain. My parents rushed me to the emergency room, and all the while they were pleading with me to not file a police complaint against Vicky. They kept saying how it would ruin her life while I was sitting in the back seat clutching my face. Vicky didn't even care, nor did she apologize. Later, when the nurse asked me about the incident, I told her the truth and she called CPS. My parents were furious with me for involving CPS, viewing it as a betrayal of family loyalty in their eyes. Vicky's actions were dismissed as a mere accident, an isolated incident that should not warrant such drastic intervention. They pleaded with the authorities, insisting that Vicky was not a danger to me and that her actions were out of character. In the end, Vicky was let go, but they warned my parents that they would keep a close eye on our situation in case any other accident happened with me. As you can imagine, Vicky was really shaken up, and so were my parents. Later on, my parents told me that they were disappointed in me for trying to ruin my sister's life. My mother started to cry and told me how I was tearing the family apart by involving outsiders. My father's disappointment was palpable, his words heavy with reproach as he questioned my decision to escalate the situation. I told him firmly that I wanted Vicky out of my life, and they agreed. I did feel guilty involving the authorities, but for the first time I felt safe at my own house. Once Vicky had been formally warned, my parents had a separate conversation with her, and since that day she stopped talking to me altogether. I very much prefer this over her, constantly hovering around me or trying to insert herself into my life. When my grandparents found out about this incident, they asked me to pack my bag so I could live with them for the remainder of high school. They informed my parents, who did not protest much, so I left to live with my grandparents. Unlike my parents' place, I felt safe and loved here. The remaining days of high school went well, and I made lasting memories with my friends. My parents never once visited me or called me throughout all that time. I knew they were happy with their beloved daughter, and so I never tried to contact them, even though it hurt me that they could so easily discard me like I was nothing. When I was graduating high school, my parents only showed up to cheer for Vicky. They didn't even congratulate me or approach me, and it felt like I was just a stranger to them. However, my grandparents were there and scolded my parents for being so blatantly obvious about their favoritism. I don't know what my grandfather told them, but my dad later approached me awkwardly and congratulated me. Later, I found out that I was accepted into a good college with a full scholarship. I was so happy about it because I was dreading asking my parents for any financial help. I informed my grandparents about this, and they offered to take me out to a nice restaurant for dinner after dinner. My grandmother posted pictures of me on her Facebook account, writing a long caption about how proud she was of me for being such an exceptional student. Our relatives soon found out about it, and they chimed in, congratulating me. I guess some of them might have reached out to my parents who had no idea about all this. Instead of feeling happy about it, my mother called to tell me the next day that Vicky had locked herself in her room crying because she had not been accepted yet by any college. And I was knowingly trying to make my sister feel bad about her grades by talking to all our relatives. She told me how this was all my fault because Vicky was apparently depressed after the CPS incident, and I had pushed her into bad grades. I was so unbelievably heartbroken that my own mother could blame me for such a thing that it was the last time I ever talked with her for a very long time. My grandparents helped me move into my college dorm due to my high school boyfriend's college being far away from me. We had broken up, so I went into college, single and ready to embrace the next chapter of my life, with newfound independence and determination to break up had been difficult, but I was excited to meet new people. This is where I met Rob. He and I were both freshmen, and we both spent half of our days in the library. Rob was unlike anyone I had ever met before. His quiet demeanor and studio nature mirrored my own, and we quickly found common ground in our shared love for academia. As the weeks turned into months, our friendship blossomed into something deeper, and I realized that I had developed feelings for Rob that went beyond mere friendship. Being an extrovert, I was quite upfront about my feelings for Rob, and I was surprised to know that he felt the same way. We started going out and have been going 8 years strong. My grandparents have met Rob, and they absolutely adore him. I have met Rob's parents who literally treat me like their own daughter. On occasion, Rob's mother has even confessed to me how she has always wanted a daughter, so she is glad that Rob met a wonderful person like me. To be honest, this is the first time I have been surrounded by family members who like me and don't actually resent me. I have told Rob stories of my childhood growing up, and he listens to me with empathy and understanding throughout these last 8 years. My parents have hardly contacted me except to send me an occasional birthday text if they remembered, but that is it. Recently, Rob and I got engaged. He proposed to me while we were trekking to our usual spot to watch the sunrise. And it was a dreamy proposal. It was so sweet. How nervous he was to pop the question to me. And I had no doubts in my mind when I accepted the proposal. I posted pictures of my engagement on my Instagram and also informed my grandparents about this. They were so happy for me and congratulated us on our future. I guess the news must have spread because my parents called me out of the blue to congratulate me as well. I thought it was just a casual conversation since we had not talked for years. They asked me about my life, my job, my apartment, before my dad asked straightforwardly if he could walk me down the aisle. I was taken aback by his sudden question, since just a few moments ago, he didn't even have an idea about which company I worked in. I told him that I had not thought about it yet. My dad told me how it would be embarrassing if I didn't ask him, and others would question us about it. So it's better if he walked me down the aisle. I scoffed and told my parents I didn't even know if I was going to be inviting them to my wedding, since we had not been in contact. But this pissed my parents off. My mother started to tell me how disappointed she was by my response, emphasizing the importance of family and tradition. She went on to tell me how they would always be my parents no matter what, and that I should let bygones be bygones. Part of me was tempted to listen to my parents and accept my dad's offer because I did want our relationship to be mended. But another part of me hesitated, wary of opening myself up to potential disappointment and hurt again. However, I was going to be entering a new chapter of my life in the few months. So I told my dad that he could walk me down the aisle, and he seemed overjoyed. Now, during the wedding planning, I reached out to my high school girlfriends who I had always stayed in touch with, despite the physical distance that had grown between us due to our careers. I told them how I wanted the gang back together and that I wanted them to be my bridesmaids. There were a lot of happy tears and congratulations. And without hesitation, they accepted my invitation to be part of my bridal party. Embracing the opportunity to reunite and celebrate this milestone in our lives together, we all planned to go to Vegas to celebrate my bachelorette party, while Rob had a separate bachelorette party with his friends as well. My friends and I posted a bunch of pictures from the party, and overall everyone had a lot of fun. However, when I came back home, my parents called me to let me know how disappointed they were that I had not invited Vicky to be a part of the celebration. I told them that there was no way that I would have involved Vicky in my bachelorette party and that I didn't want it to be a part of my life. This took my parents by surprise and they asked me what I meant. So I clarified that Vicky's actions, particularly her history of deceit and betrayal, had left me deeply wounded and mistrustful of her intentions. I couldn't fathom inviting her to such an intimate and joyous occasion as my bachelorette party, knowing that her presence would only cast a shadow over the festivities. I also informed my parents that this was also why she was not invited to my wedding. Hearing this, my parents lost it. They went off about how I had no right to exclude my sister from my wedding and how it was my duty as her sister to include her in such important events. They told me that Vicky had been looking forward to meeting me after she found out that I was getting married. I was confused, and I asked my parents what gave her that idea, since we had not even talked to each other for such a very long time. But my parents brushed my concerns aside, saying, "This is not how sisters behaved with each other. I understand where you're coming from," I told them. "But you have to understand that my relationship with Vicky is complicated. After everything that's happened, I just don't feel comfortable having her be a part of my wedding. She has not even once apologized to me for everything she put me through." However, my parents, as usual, ignored my words. My mother kept saying how she wanted what was best for the family and that inviting Vicky wasn't a big deal anyway. My dad insisted that our relative would talk about why my sister wasn't invited, and this would cast a negative light on my wedding. However, I knew better than to yield to their demands, so I did not relent to them. I told them that I was okay with people talking behind my back and questioning my character, as long as I was surrounded by people I liked and trusted during my wedding. My mother then asked if my fiancé would be okay with this, and went on to tell me how my in-laws were going to judge me for being so unbelievably cruel as to exclude my own sister from my wedding. I laughed and informed my parents that my fiancé and in-laws knew about my family dynamics, and none of them would even care if Vicky was present or not. They urged me to reconsider, emphasizing the importance of family unity and forgiveness, but I remained steadfast in my resolve, unwilling to compromise my own sense of well-being for the sake of appeasing others. In the end, we agreed to disagree, each of us holding on to our own perspectives, and my parents told me how they needed to think things over, and we ended our conversation there. I didn't inform my grandparents about this as I felt a bit guilty for standing up to my parents, and they completely have my back. My grandparents told me that I should not force myself to invite anyone I didn't want there, and that my parents were, as usual, trying to guilt-trip me. Since this conversation, I have been feeling a bit better about my decision and got distracted with my wedding planning. Since my wedding is fast approaching, last week my dad called me to let me know that he had fought long and hard and that he and mom would no longer be attending the wedding, before I could even react. He went on to say that this also meant that he would not be walking me down the aisle. I asked him if there was a specific reason why, and he informed me that Vicky was going to be moving to a new place soon, which my parents had helped her find. And since I was going to be excluding her from the wedding, she had decided to host a housewarming party that same day, so they would be attending that instead of my wedding. I felt a mix of shock and disbelief wash over me as I processed my father's words. The realization that my own sister's housewarming party took precedence over my wedding was a bitter pill to swallow, exacerbating the sense of hurt and betrayal that I had always felt for years. I simply told him that I understood, and I hung up the call. Although I tried to act brave in front of my dad, deep down, the pain of rejection cut deeper than words could express. When I informed Rob, he was furious about how insensitive my parents could be after they were the ones who had insisted on being invited. He was the one who gave me the idea that I should ask my grandfather since he and his grandmother were basically there in my life more than my parents. I agreed, so I called up my grandparents and asked them if they would be willing to walk me down the aisle at my wedding. Tears welled up in my eyes as I spoke, overcome with emotion at the thought of how much they meant to me. Hugh and Grandpa have always been there for me, I said, my voice choked with emotion. You've been more than just grandparents to me. You've been like parents, and I can't imagine anyone else I'd rather have by my side on my wedding day. My grandparents didn't even hesitate before saying yes. They told me how honored they would be to walk me down the aisle. And unlike my parents, they would not disappoint me. Their words reassured me, and in that moment, I felt a profound sense of peace and contentment wash over me with my grandparents by my side. I knew that I had a family who loved me unconditionally and accepted me for who I was, flaws and all. I also talked to my in-laws about this, and Rob's parents assured me that they did not care if my parents didn't attend, and that regardless of their attendance, they were delighted to witness and support our union. My wedding is in 2 days, and today I woke up to several missed calls from my dad. I called him back thinking it was an emergency, and when he picked up, he asked me if it was true that my grandparents were walking me down the aisle. I told him yes, that was true. And then my dad went off about how disrespectful this was to have asked my grandparents. I reminded him how he was the one who had declined to come to my wedding, so I didn't see why he was so upset. My dad went on to yell at me about how he and mom were just trying to make me see the wrong of my ways and that they thought that by declining the invitation, it would teach me a lesson. He went on to say how it was he and mom who had raised me and paid for my food and education, so my grandparents had no right to replace him. I tried to reason with him, explaining that my grandparents had been there for me in ways he and mom never were, but he wouldn't listen. He also told me how I had done nothing but alienate everyone from me, and this was all my fault. Since this conversation, I have been wondering if I really did something wrong here. Aida. For asking my grandparents to walk me down the aisle. Update 1. Wow, I did not expect so many people would comment on my post. I have seen a lot of advice and suggestions on how I should approach this situation. I do agree that I need to cut off my parents permanently, because the constant back and forth is exhausting and is starting to affect my mental health. I don't want them in my life when they have consistently shown me that Vicky is always their first priority. My parents are indeed selfish, and I have known that for a long time. However, how can a child just stop loving his or her parents? It's a much easier thing to say, but it's very difficult to actually do it. However, for my mental peace, I have no choice but to do this, so I can enjoy my wedding tomorrow. Update 2. Sorry for the lack of update this past month, but I have been quite busy since my wedding. First of all, yes, my wedding went quite well with my grandparents by my side as I walked down the aisle. Despite the absence of my parents, I felt a deep sense of joy as I exchanged vows with Rob, committing to spend the rest of our lives together. My girlfriends and I danced the night away, and I can't begin to describe how important it is to stay in touch with your childhood friends no matter what, because sometimes they are your chosen family during the reception. I did feel a twinge of sadness at the realization that my parents were not there to share in this special moment, especially as I watched Rob's parents and cousins giving speeches to him. However, I took solace in the knowledge that I had made the right decision for myself, prioritizing my own well-being and happiness. Some of my girlfriends did give speeches, sharing memories of our experiences and the bond that had carried us through both good times and bad. In the days following the wedding, Rob and I went for our honeymoon, which his parents had paid for as a wedding gift. I spent all my days just lazing around, enjoying myself with my husband. I feel so giddy every time I look at Rob and realize that he is married to me now. As I had mentioned earlier, I did cut off my parents by blocking them from everywhere. I didn't bother sending them an explanation because, very frankly, they don't even deserve one. I have no idea whether Vicky actually had a housewarming that day, or it was just an excuse for my parents to not attend my wedding. But at this point, I don't care. I wish nothing but the best to them and their beloved daughter. Update 3. So, I was not going to update anything further since my last update, but something just unexpected happened, and I thought you all deserved to know. I haven't checked my email in the past month because I was busy with my wedding and honeymoon, but today, as I was sorting through the emails, I found an email from Vicky. I don't even know how she found out my email address, and I was completely taken aback. I hesitated over whether to open her mail or simply delete it unread, but curiosity got the better of me, so I clicked on the email. Inside was a lengthy message from Vicky, expressing her regret over our strained relationship and her desire to reconcile. She acknowledged the mistakes she had made in the past, admitting that she had been selfish and immature. Vicky apologized for the pain she had caused me over the years and expressed a genuine desire to make amends. She went on to write how she feels happy for me now that I'm married and that she wishes me nothing but the best. She ended the mail pleading that I should not punish my parents by cutting them off and that they missed me. Reading her words, I felt the mix of emotions: surprise, skepticism. Part of me wants to believe that Vicky has truly changed, that she is sincere in her apology and willing to work towards repairing our relationship. But another part of me remains guarded because this seems too good to be true. However, regardless of what she has written, I know for sure my parents don't miss me because if they had, they would not have treated me this way all these years. I thought about sending a reply back to her, but then I decided against it. After all, forgiveness isn't something to be rushed. It is a process that requires time and reflection. And while I am not sure if I'm ready to forgive Vicky, I don't want to completely burn the bridge either, since she is the one who has apologized to me for her actions. To be honest, after my marriage, I no longer feel alone. I have learned to recognize that I have my loving husband by my side, supportive friends, and the unwavering love of my grandparents, and with their support. I know that I can navigate whatever challenges lay ahead without ever needing Vicky or my parents in my life. I have also looked into it and have found a good therapist with whom I have booked my first appointment. I have taken this step so I can address and resolve any wounds from my past and heal from them. I'm 37 now, and life looks a lot different than it did a few years back. I'm currently married to Larry, who was once the other man in my life when I was still married to my first husband. We've officially been together for 5 years, married for 4. It's weird how life takes these turns, isn't it? Let's backtrack to the beginning. I met my ex-husband in college, and we got married young. He was always the hardworking type, ambitious and dedicated, which I admired so much about him. But as his career took off, it demanded more and more of his time. Our home life suffered, especially our intimacy. He was great in many ways, helpful around the house, made sure to carve out time for monthly dates, but emotionally and physically I felt neglected. Enter Larry. I met him when I was 31 at a friend's party. He was charismatic, charming, and really seemed to understand me. He made me feel seen and heard in ways I hadn't experienced in years. We started off as friends, but quickly our connection deepened, and 7 months later, we began an affair. I won't lie. It was exhilarating at first, filled with passion and the excitement of new love. But, deep down, I knew the situation was complex and hurtful. Fast forward a bit, and my marriage couldn't withstand the secrecy. When my husband discovered the affair, I was faced with a hard choice. My feelings for Larry had grown so strong that when pushed to decide, I chose to leave my husband for him. We got a divorce, and not long after, Larry and I got married. The dream, however, started to show cracks pretty quickly. Our first 2 years were blissful, like living in a bubble. We were both working, using some of the settlement money I received from my divorce to enjoy life and solidify our bond. But then 2020 hit, and it hit hard. Larry's work dried up due to the pandemic, and suddenly I found myself as the main provider. Financial strain put a stress on us like never before. I took on 2 jobs just to keep us afloat, and even then, it was a struggle. We had to lean on my parents for support, something I never thought we'd need to do. The reality of our situation sank in further when we had to sell the house and car I got from my divorce settlement. We downsized to a cheaper place, squeezing every penny to save for a potential business venture as a way to turn things around. Starting the business was a desperate move, but thankfully, it began doing better than we expected. It was like once we shed all remnants of my past life, including the physical ties to my ex-husband, we could finally start to build something new for ourselves. It's been hard work and there are no guarantees, but we're holding on to the hope that things will continue to improve. About 4 months ago, I found out that my partner Larry was secretly taking money out of my savings. That's like if you had a piggy bank where you were saving up for something cool, and then you found out someone was sneaking some out when you weren't looking. When I asked him about it, he got really mean and said he didn't trust me. That's because before I was with Larry, I made a huge mistake in my previous marriage. I wasn't faithful. And since Larry was single when we got together, he thinks it's okay to keep some of my money for himself, just in case things go bad between us. Larry also doesn't help out at home at all. Imagine if you had to do all the chores and someone else just chilled, played games, hung out with friends at the bar, and didn't do anything to help. That's what's happening. And it gets worse. I recently found out he's cheating on me with a waitress from the bar. It really shocked me and made me super sad because I thought we were supposed to trust each other. Now, talking about divorce feels like a giant mess because we don't have a lot of money, and everything seems messed up. It's even harder than when I was with my ex-husband. Plus, Larry just quit his job, so things are really tight, and it's hard to pay for everything we need. I also have a daughter from my first marriage. She's 12 and tells me how awesome her dad is doing. They even went on a cool trip to Venice, which makes me a bit sad and jealous. I feel like maybe I didn't end things well with him. I did tell him the truth about cheating, and we split pretty amicably. He got to keep our daughter most of the time, and I got our house and car and to see her 5 days a month. But now I can't stop thinking about my ex. Maybe it's guilt, or maybe there's still love there, or maybe I'm just really mixed up because everything's a mess. I wonder if I should talk to him, but we only ever chat about our daughter, and I haven't seen him in person for a year and a half. Part of me thinks I'm a terrible person for cheating and breaking up a good thing before, and now my life's just falling apart. A small edit. I didn't left my daughter. My husband begged me to give him the primary custody as he realized he can't have it as he works in a very demanding job. I just wanted the house. But we came to a conclusion where he offered to give me money. Car and the house in exchange for primary custody. I feel guilty. Yes, but do I want to get back to him? No, because I know it won't be the right thing to do. I destroyed him and I am guilty enough. Now he rebuilt himself. I'm proud of him. My life is in shambles. And it is because of me. I take full responsibility. I just keep thinking of him because I miss him. I want to have a conversation with him and nothing more. This with the fact that the man I left him for is now having an affair and cheating on me is tearing me up. Now for the top comments before the update. Taking his money, car and house is the thing that stands out to me here. Anything else I can understand? But to screw him over that badly and now want him back? No sympathy. Having an AP is one thing, but treating your ex like an ATM after screwing him over. OP? It was a part of the deal we made. He badly wanted the primary custody of our daughter. But having the job that demanded much of his time, he knew it won't be happening. And I would probably get the primary custody of the child, which is why he offered this house, money, and car in exchange for primary custody of the daughter. He wanted this, not me. I told him over and over again. Surely I don't deserve a second of his time because I already screwed him. I know this. Nothing I can do can change this. I just can't stop thinking about him. Comment 2. We all make mistakes. At least you're now wiser. Start focusing on your life and better yourself. You should at least open up to your ex. Say you are sorry, but move on after. Good luck. Thanks. Comment 3. Your AP sounds like a total loser. I'm not sure why. If you left your husband, who sounds like a much better person, why you can't bring yourself to leave this moocher of a man. I don't get why anyone willingly gets with a man or woman who plays video games as if it's a full-time job and does not have an actual paying full-time job. OP. He wasn't like this during the affair, and when we went legit, He was understanding, ambitious, and a confident person. He actually gave me the attention I craved for my ex, which is why I took the leap. It turned out to be something that essentially destroyed my life, my ex, his life, and my daughter's childhood as a whole. Comment 4. Maybe he was hiding these bad traits from you by being the single dependable. I'll do anything for you, guy. To me, he sounds toxic. You just really need to cut your losses and move on. Also, I didn't really want to get into this as it's harsh, but you traded your daughter in for assets, and now you don't have any of those either. Your parents sound like they may be able to get you back on your feet. If I were you, I'd move in with them and stay solo for a long, long while. Edit. I hope that you get the help that you need to get past this from friends, family, a therapist, or even just a real talk with yourself about how this isn't a good relationship to be in. Good luck moving forward. Comment 5. I mean, nobody ever seems to say this to the man when they end up becoming a weekend parent. Is it crap? Absolute glee. But there is rarely a moral outcry regardless of circumstance. It's just assumed by society that a mother has more value than a father. Opie already ducked X over beyond belief. This is why going legit with younger kids in the picture is so fucking dangerous. And I hate that it's so heavily condoned in this group. It's such rash decision. Opie. As materialistic and narcissistic as hell. Yet if she posted prior to the divorce, this group would have egged her on and encouraged that she ruined her husband and the divorce. OP, for heaven's sake, I didn't traded my daughter. I still see her. I told my ex-husband I cheated on him and wanted to leave him. Do you think it was easy? He begged me to give him the primary custody of our daughter. I already shattered him enough. I already destroyed him. Do you think it would have been all right if I got the primary custody of our daughter while he received the cash assets and 50/50 ownership of the house? Things would have been complicated. I didn't want to mention about our daughter in the post. I'm already a horrible person and I'm getting shredded by both the memes and comments. And then in real life, my life is in shambles. I'm working 2 jobs and basically paying Larry the money he spends on his AP. Do you think this is easy? That being said, I deserve it. I deserve all of it because of the foolish decisions I made. When reality hits you, you realize how much crap you are taking on. All the hell broke loose on me and it's awful. I realized I destroyed my ex-husband in all ways. About the trading, I didn't trade. It was he who offered me the house, the car, in exchange for primary custody. He literally begged me for it. What? What have you done? If you were in my place, fight him in divorce for split custody, even after he begged you, even after he offered you, even after he promised not to tell our daughter anything about my cheating. I know what I did. It's way more tough for me than for you to say it. Even after everything, she is my daughter. I never gave up on her. I sure made foolish decisions that I'm getting punished for. Edit. Pardon my grammar errors. I'm not from US. I applaud you for admitting to your foolishness. Update 1. So a few months ago, I found out my husband Larry was sneaking money out of my savings. That's like if you had a secret stash of candy and someone secretly started taking pieces without asking. Pretty sneaky, right? I was upset, but it got even worse. Fast forward to last Thursday. I come home early from work because I wanted to surprise Larry with dinner. And guess what I find? Larry in our living room, but he's not alone. He's there with someone from his previous work, and it's not just any coworker. It's the assistant principal from the school where he used to work. And they were not just having a friendly chat. It was obvious they were way too close, sitting together on our couch like it was the most normal thing in the world. Larry saw me and wasn't even shocked. He just looked at me and said, "This is how things are now. You need to get used to it." Can you believe that? I felt like my heart stopped. I just stood there, not knowing what to say or do. That night, after Larry and his friend left, I called my best friend over because I really needed someone to talk to. We sat in my kitchen and I told her everything while trying not to cry into my ice cream. Then, she accidentally let it slip that a bunch of our friends knew about Larry's behavior. They thought I knew and was okay with it because, well, I had cheated in my past marriage. I felt so betrayed, like everyone was against me. Feeling like a detective in a mystery show, I decided to dig deeper into Larry's life. I found receipts and a lease for an apartment I never knew about. It turns out he's been renting a place across town under a fake name, and guess who's been staying there? The same assistant principal. It's like he had a whole secret life I didn't know about. Amid all this mess, my phone buzzed. It was my ex-husband, the father of my daughter. He was really concerned because our daughter overheard him talking about my situation and was upset. My heart sank. I hated the idea of her getting hurt by all this grown-up drama. My ex asked if we could meet to talk about how to handle things with our daughter, who's only 12 and shouldn't have to deal with any of this. It made me think about how things used to be with him, more stable and secure, even if we had our problems. Now here's the crazy part. Larry decided he needed space after all this blew up. He packed some bags and left, just like that, saying he wasn't sure if we even had a future together. And there I was, left to pick up the pieces of my broken heart and a broken home. I'm stuck wondering what I should do next. Should I try to fix things with Larry, or is it time to let go and start fresh? Maybe I should even talk to my ex more, not to get back together, but just to find some peace in all this chaos. One thing is clear, I need to focus on my daughter and make sure she's okay. Everything else is just noise compared to making sure she feels safe and loved. Update 2. Last week, I was just chilling at home trying to have a normal morning, sipping my coffee and scrolling through some emails. Then the mail came. I figured it was just the usual stuff, maybe some ads or the electric bill. But nope, there was this super official looking envelope mixed in. My heart sank a little because, let's be honest, good news rarely comes in envelopes that fancy. I opened it, and bam, it was like a lightning strike but without any of the cool thunder. The letter was from a lawyer, and not just any lawyer. This was a lawyer hired by Larry, my soon-to-be ex-husband. Yep, Larry decided it's time to divorce, which honestly, I saw coming. But here's the kicker. He's not just looking to split up and go our separate ways. He wants to take half of everything I own, including my business and my 401k account. My business is like my baby, something I built from the ground up, and my 401k is all the money I've been saving for when I'm old and gray and want to relax a bit. Reading that letter, I felt all sorts of things, angry, scared, and just really, really stressed. How could Larry, who used to be my partner in everything, turn around and try to take all that I've worked so hard for? It felt super unfair, like being the main character in a movie where everything starts going wrong. After freaking out for a good 10 minutes, I called my sister. She's always been the one I turn to when things get rough. We talked for a long time. She was super supportive, telling me that I needed to stand up for myself and not let Larry push me around. She said, "You gotta fight for what's yours and show him he can't just take things from you." She also told me to get a good lawyer, someone who would help me keep what I've worked so hard to build. Now here's where it gets even trickier. Fighting this battle in court is going to cost a lot of money. Lawyers aren't cheap, and with the business already feeling the pinch from all the drama, customers can sense these things, you know? I'm sweating about how I'm going to pay for all this. On top of all the grown-up legal stuff, I'm also a mom, and my daughter is seeing all this happen. She's only 12, but she's so wise and kind. She sees me upset and comes over to give me the biggest hugs, telling me, "Mom, it's going to be okay. You're the strongest person I know." It melts my heart. She's my little ray of sunshine, and I've made a promise to myself that no matter how messy this gets, I won't let it mess her up. She deserves a happy mom and a stable life, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to give her that. So, what's next? Well, it looks like I'm about to step into a huge battle. I need to protect my business, my savings, and most importantly, keep my daughter's world as happy and safe as possible. It's going to be tough, but I've got my sister and my daughter cheering me on, and I'm ready to fight like never before. Update 3. Okay, so remember how I told you things were getting pretty crazy with Larry wanting to take everything in the divorce? Well, I thought that was as bad as it could get, but nope. Life had another twist waiting for me. Feeling really down and kind of lost, I started thinking a lot about my past, especially about Mark, my first husband. You know, he was the guy I was with before all this mess started. Things with him were pretty good at times, stable, secure, and he was really kind. After the whole disaster with Larry, I started missing those good old days with Mark. I thought maybe, just maybe, there could be a chance to fix things, to maybe start fresh with him. So, what did I do? I decided to actually go and see Mark. Yes, I drove all the way to his house, my heart racing like crazy. I was super nervous but felt like I had to try, you know? When I got there, I took a deep breath and knocked on his door. When Mark opened the door, his face was a total picture of shock. Like he couldn't believe I was standing there. I got all jittery and started talking really fast. "Hey Mark, I know it's been ages and a lot has happened. I've been thinking a lot about us, about our past and how we ended things. I'm really sorry for how everything turned out. I'm in a tough spot right now, and I guess I just miss how good things were with you. Do you think there's any chance we could talk about it? Maybe see if there's a way to start over?" Mark looked at me like I had just turned up from another planet. He was clearly upset, and his voice got kind of loud. He said, "You think you can just show up out of nowhere and ask for a do-over? After all this time? After everything you did?" I tried to explain, to tell him how sorry I was, but he wasn't having any of it. It was like he had built up all this anger, and now it was all coming out. Before I knew it, he said, "I think you should leave. We've both moved on, and there's nothing left to say." And just like that, He closed the door right in my face. I stood there for a moment, feeling a mix of shock, sadness, and a ton of regret. Driving back home was rough. I was crying, feeling totally alone and unsure about everything. Why did I think going to Mark would help? What made me believe he might want to revisit something we had both left behind? Now, I'm sitting here back at my place, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. I've got this messy divorce with Larry looming over me, trying to snatch away my business and my savings. And on top of that, I just got a major reality check from Mark, which really hurt. But here's what I realized. I can't keep looking back. I've got to face forward. Yes, I made mistakes, big ones, but I've learned from them too. I need to focus on the here and now, especially on being the best mom I can be for my daughter. She needs me to be strong, to be stable, and to show her that no matter how hard life gets, we can get through it. So the plan? I'm going to get myself a really good lawyer, someone who can help me fight Larry in court and make sure he doesn't take everything I've worked for. I'm going to pour my heart into my business, make it stronger and better than ever. And I'm going to spend every moment I can making sure my daughter knows she's loved and protected. It's not going to be easy, and I'm sure there are more challenges ahead. But I've got to keep fighting, keep pushing through, because at the end of the day, I believe there's a light at the end of this tunnel, and I'm going to reach it no matter what. Update 4. So, where do I even begin? Just when I thought I had seen it all, life decided to throw me another sham, or maybe a couple of them. After the whole debacle with Mark shutting the door in my face, I felt pretty down in the dumps. But you know what they say, life doesn't give you a break just because you're feeling low. First things first, I had to tackle the huge problem of my pending divorce with Larry, who suddenly turned into a character from a villain movie, wanting half of everything I own, my hard-earned business and all my savings piled up in my 401k. It was like a nightmare where you're falling and just can't wake up. Determined not to let Larry take me down, I went on a hunt for a superhero. Well, a super lawyer, actually. I found Miss Carter, a lawyer who came with awesome reviews and a reputation for being tough as nails. The first time I met her, I spilled everything. The love, the betrayal, the sneaky financial moves by Larry, and his outrageous demands. She listened to all of it with this intense focus, jotting down notes faster than I could talk. After I finished my long, sad tale, she looked up, her eyes sharp, and said firmly, "We're going to fight this, and we're going to win. You're not alone." It was the first time in weeks that I felt a glimmer of hope. We planned our battle strategy meticulously, marking out every step we'd take to safeguard my business and my future. While Miss Carter was gearing up for the legal battle, back at home, things were getting pretty emotional. My daughter, who's only 12, was at my home after I asked my Mark to take her for one day. She seemed to pick up on the stress vibes. She started doing these little things to cheer me up, like leaving cute notes on my pillow or drawing pictures of us holding hands, super happy. It was sweet, but also heart-wrenching because she was trying to take care of me when it should be the other way around. It made me even more determined not to let this whole mess drag me down. I had to be strong for her and for me. Just when I thought I had a handle on things, there was a knock at the door one lazy Saturday morning. I opened it, not expecting much, and who was there? My brother, who I hadn't seen in years because of a massive family fallout. There he was, looking kind of awkward and nervous. He asked if we could talk. We ended up sitting at the kitchen table with 2 steaming cups of coffee between us. He told me he'd heard about my situation through the family grapevine and felt it was time to put our differences aside and stick together because, according to him, family should stick together. It was unexpected but felt kind of nice to reconnect. He even offered to help out with my daughter whenever things got too hectic. Rebuilding bridges with my brother was like finding a safe harbor in the middle of a storm. It reminded me that even when things look really dark, there can be unexpected moments of light, people showing up for you, ready to help. So now, here I am, gearing up for what might be the fight of my life in court, but feeling a bit stronger with my lawyer and my brother by my side. I'm learning a ton about dealing with tough times, how they can really show you who's willing to stand by you and who you can really count on. Life is unpredictable, kind of like a wild. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down, but the ride always goes on. And as I brace myself for the next loop-de-loop, I'm holding on to the lessons I've learned, the people who are sticking by me, and the hope that after every storm, there's a little bit of sunshine waiting to break through. Update 5. The day started like any other stressful day. I woke up early, stomach all knotted up and my mind racing about the court hearing. I met Miss Carter, my lawyer, outside the courthouse. She looked sharp, confident, and ready to take on the world. Seeing her like that made me feel a bit better. Like maybe we had a real shot at winning this thing. We walked into the courthouse together, the air heavy and cool. The courtroom was big and a little intimidating, with high ceilings and long, echoing sounds every time someone moved or spoke. I sat down trying to look calm, but inside my heart was racing like a marathon runner. Larry was already there, looking all serious and lawyer it up. His lawyer had this slick, smooth-talking vibe, kind of like those TV lawyers who can twist any story to make their client look like an angel. The judge called the room to order, and Larry's lawyer started off. He was really good at telling Larry's side of the story. He talked about how Larry had always supported me in my business, even if it wasn't with money. He painted a picture of Larry as this loving, self-sacrificing husband who just wanted what he thought was fair. Then it was our turn. Miss Carter stood up and presented our case. She was amazing, laying out all the evidence we had gathered, emails, financial records, everything showing that Larry hadn't contributed to the business and had been involved in shady stuff on the side. She spoke clearly and strongly, making it seem like we had the upper hand. But then, the unexpected happened. When Larry got up to speak, he was really emotional. He talked about how lonely he felt when I was busy with my business, how he felt left behind. He even teared up a bit. It was a performance worthy of an award, and it seemed to hit a nerve with the judge. The waiting for the verdict was the worst part. Time seemed to slow down, and every tick of the clock was like a thud in my chest. Finally, the judge made his decision, and it was like a punch in the gut. Larry won. He was awarded half of everything. Half of my business, half of my 401k, half of my world. It didn't seem fair. It didn't seem right. But it was real. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt like I was in a bad dream. Everything I'd worked so hard for, half of it was now gone, just like that. It was tough to take. Back home, I had to take some time to just absorb it all. My brother, who had been my rock these past few weeks, kept reminding me that this wasn't the end. "You're down, but not out," he said. "You can rebuild. You can come back stronger." His words helped, even if they didn't fix the hurt. Now I'm looking at what's next. It's going to be a tough road, trying to rebuild my finances and my business. But I've learned something important through all this. Resilience isn't just about fighting through the good times. It's about how you handle the hits in the bad times. I've got my daughter, my brother, and a lesson in toughness that no courtroom can take away from me. As I plan my next steps, I'm focused on recovery and rebuilding, not just my business, but my spirit too. Life threw me a curveball, but I'm learning how to swing back even harder. Last update. As I sit here typing this, a lot has changed since my last update. The dust has settled from the courtroom and life has found a new kind of normal, but it's a normal that came with tough lessons and some real soul-searching. Looking back at everything that happened, from my first marriage to Mark, the whirlwind and downfall with Larry, to the dramatic courtroom battles, I've come to a stark realization. If you have a good thing, especially a good relationship, it's worth more than gold, and it shouldn't be taken for granted. I used to think that the grass might be greener on the other side. Larry seemed like an exciting new chapter after feeling neglected in my marriage with Mark. But that adventure turned into a nightmare, one that cost me not just financially, but emotionally and spiritually too. Larry's charm was just a mask, and beneath it was a person I barely recognized by the end. The court's decision was a hard pill to swallow. Losing half of everything to Larry felt like a cruel joke, especially after everything came to light. But it was during these dark times that I found out just how resilient I could be. My daughter, with her endless optimism and love, and my brother, with his renewed support, showed me the true meaning of family and strength. So here's my piece of advice. If you have a good husband or a good partner, cherish them. Work on your problems together, communicate, and don't let small gaps grow into gulfs that can't be bridged. I learned the hard way that the excitement of new things fades, but the deep, abiding comfort of a shared history and mutual respect is rare and precious. I'm rebuilding now. My business, my life, my inner circle. It's not easy, and some days are harder than others. But I'm moving forward with a clearer understanding of what's important. I'm also giving back, talking to young people about my experiences, hoping they can learn from my mistakes rather than repeating them. Life is a series of chapters, and while some of my chapters have been pretty turbulent, I'm working on making the next ones full of peace, growth, and happiness. Mistakes are part of the human experience, but they don't have to define us. We can learn, we can grow, and most importantly, we can forgive ourselves and move forward. At 16, my parents blamed me for my brother's arrest, insisted I was a bad influence, and sent me to live with relatives without a phone. I survived and studied. Years later, they begged me to represent him in court, only to learn I was the attorney they tried to bury. Hey, Reddit! So this is probably the most satisfying thing that's ever happened to me, and I've been sitting on this story for a few weeks now, trying to figure out how to tell it. Buckle up because this one's a ride. I'm currently 29 years old, but this story starts when I was 16 and my younger brother Jackson was 14. To understand how we got here, you need to understand the family dynamic growing up. Jackson was the golden child from day one. I'm talking the kid who could literally do no wrong in my parents' eyes. I was the responsible one, the one who was expected to set the example, help around the house, and basically be a built-in free babysitter. When Jackson forgot to do his homework, it was because he was tired from sports practice. When I forgot to do mine, I was being irresponsible and needed to manage my time better. When Jackson got a C on a test, my parents would comfort him and tell him he tried his best. When I got a B, I'd get a lecture about not applying myself. You get the picture. Classic golden child versus scapegoat situation. The thing is, I didn't really mind being the responsible one. I actually took pride in it. I made honor roll every semester. I had a part-time job at the local grocery store. I stayed out of trouble. Meanwhile, Jackson was getting into increasingly stupid stuff. Nothing major at first, just typical teenage rebellion stuff. Skipping class, talking back to teachers, hanging out with kids who were clearly bad news. I tried warning my parents about Jackson's friends. There was this one kid named Brandon who was 17 and already had a juvenile record for shoplifting. Another one, Kevin, had been suspended twice for fighting. These were not good influences, and anyone with half a brain could see that Jackson was starting to act differently around them. More secretive, more aggressive, more willing to break rules. But every time I said something to my parents, they'd dismiss it. I was being jealous. I was being overprotective. I needed to let Jackson have friends and make his own choices. My mom actually told me once that I should be more like Jackson and learn to relax and have fun, instead of being so uptight all the time. Yeah, Mom, I'll get right on that. Things escalated during the summer before my junior year. Jackson had just finished 8th grade and was about to start high school. Brandon, Kevin, and a couple of other kids from their group started hanging out at our house more often. My parents loved it because they thought Jackson was being social and making friends. I thought it was a disaster waiting to happen. One night in July, I was working the closing shift at the grocery store. I got home around 10:30 p.m. and the house was quiet. My parents were watching TV in the living room, and I figured Jackson was in his room. I went upstairs, did my usual routine, and went to bed around midnight. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to voices downstairs. Not loud voices, but that urgent whispering that means something is very wrong. I got up and crept to my bedroom door, opening it just enough to hear what was going on. My dad was on the phone with someone, and I heard him say, "Yes, this is about Jackson. We'll be right there." Then there was frantic movement, doors opening and closing, and my parents rushed out of the house. I looked out my window and watched them speed away in my dad's car. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I just sat in my room, door cracked open, waiting. They came home around 5 a.m. I heard my mom crying, my dad's angry voice, and then Jackson. My brother was sobbing like I'd never heard before. Not the kind of crying you do when you're sad, but the kind you do when you're terrified. I stayed in my room. Something told me to keep quiet, to not get involved until I knew what had happened. Around 7 a.m., my dad knocked on my door and told me to get dressed and come downstairs. Family meeting. This is where everything went sideways. Turns out, Jackson and his brilliant friends had decided to break into the high school. Not to steal anything major, they weren't that smart. They wanted to vandalize the principal's office because Brandon had some beef with the guy. They broke a window to get in, spray painted some walls, knocked over file cabinets, and were apparently trying to access the principal's computer when the security company's alarm went off. The police caught all 4 of them still in the building. Jackson had a can of spray paint in his hand when they found him. Open and shut case, caught red-handed. My parents sat me down in the living room. Jackson was there too, looking like death. His eyes were red from crying, and he kept his head down the whole time. My dad was pacing, and my mom looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. Then my dad said something that made my blood run cold. "We need to talk about how you influenced Jackson to do this." I actually laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. My parents proceeded to explain to me how this was somehow my fault. According to them, I had created a negative environment in the house with my constant criticism of Jackson's friends. I had made Jackson feel like he needed to prove himself. I had been a bad role model by working too much and not spending enough time with my brother. My complaints about his friends had pushed Jackson to act out because he felt I didn't support him. The mental gymnastics required to reach this conclusion were Olympic-level impressive. I tried to defend myself. I pointed out that I had actively warned them about this exact situation. I had told them Brandon was trouble. I had said Jackson needed better boundaries. But they weren't hearing it. In their minds, they needed someone to blame who wasn't their precious golden child. And I was the convenient scapegoat. My mom actually said, and I'm quoting directly here, "If you had been a better big brother, Jackson would never have felt the need to seek approval from those boys." Jackson just sat there and said nothing. Didn't defend me, didn't correct them, nothing. He let them blame me for something I had literally tried to prevent. That's when they dropped the real bomb. I was being sent to live with my aunt and uncle in another state. According to my parents, I needed to be removed from the situation so Jackson could focus on getting his life back together without my negative influence. They'd already talked to my aunt, who had reluctantly agreed to take me in for as long as necessary. I had a week to pack my stuff. They were pulling me out of my school, away from my job, away from everything I knew. And the kicker? They were taking my phone. No contact with my friends, no social media, nothing. They said I needed to focus on reflecting on my role in this situation and learning to be a better family member. I was 16 years old, being exiled from my own family for something I not only didn't do, but had actively tried to prevent. The worst part? Jackson's punishment was house arrest and community service. He got to stay home with our parents, who would support him through this difficult time. I got banishment. The drive to my aunt and uncle's place was 6 hours. My dad drove, and we didn't speak the entire time. When we got there, he handed my aunt a folder with my school records and medical information, gave me one of those awkward side hugs, and told me to think about what you've done. My Aunt Julie and Uncle Robert were good people, but they were clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. They had a small 3-bedroom house in rural Pennsylvania, and they gave me the guest room. They were both in their 50s, had grown kids of their own who were already out of the house and weren't really prepared to have a teenager living with them. The first few weeks were rough. No phone meant no connection to my old life. My aunt and uncle had a landline, but my parents had specifically told them not to let me use it, except for emergencies. I couldn't call my friends, couldn't check in with my former boss at the grocery store, couldn't do anything. It was like being cut off from the world. I tried to email my friends from my aunt's computer once, but she'd been instructed to monitor my internet usage. My parents didn't want me spreading my version of events to people back home. So I was cut off not just physically, but digitally too. In the age of social media and constant connection, I was completely isolated. The worst part was not knowing what people were being told. Were my friends wondering why I'd disappeared? Were my parents telling everyone I'd been sent away because I was a problem? Was anyone back home defending me? Or did everyone just accept my parents' version of events? School started in late August, and I enrolled at the local high school as a junior. I knew exactly no one. I was the weird new kid who showed up 3 weeks into the school year with no social media presence and no phone. Making friends was basically impossible. I ate lunch alone, did my homework alone, and spent most of my free time in my room. The other kids didn't know what to make of me. When they asked where I'd moved from, I'd give vague answers about family stuff. When they asked for my social media handles, I'd say I wasn't on social media. In 2012, that was like saying you didn't believe in electricity. They'd look at me like I was some kind of alien. Teachers were confused too. Here was this kid with excellent academic records from his previous school, clearly smart and capable, but completely socially isolated. I caught my guidance counselor watching me eat lunch alone more than once, probably wondering if he should intervene. But I wasn't being bullied. I was just alone. There's no intervention for that. But here's the thing about being isolated like that. It gives you a lot of time to think. And I had a lot to think about. I thought about how my parents had treated me my entire life. How nothing I did was ever good enough while Jackson got praised for the bare minimum. How they'd blame me for his mistakes instead of holding him accountable. How they'd thrown me away like trash when it was convenient for their narrative. And I got angry. Not the hot, explosive kind of anger that makes you do stupid things. The cold, calculated kind of anger that makes you focused. I decided that if they wanted to throw me away, fine. But I was going to succeed in spite of them, not because of them. I threw myself into school. I was already a good student, but I became obsessive about it. I studied every night until my aunt had to tell me to turn off my light and go to sleep. I joined the debate team because it didn't require me to have a social circle, and it would look good on college applications. I volunteered at the local library on weekends for the same reason. My aunt and uncle noticed the change. Uncle Robert pulled me aside about 2 months in and asked if I was okay. I told him I was fine, just trying to stay busy. He looked at me with this sad expression and said, "You know this situation isn't fair to you, right?" It was the first time anyone in my family had acknowledged that. I nearly cried right there in his garage. He continued, Your parents are handling this all wrong, but you're doing the right thing, focusing on school and your future. Don't let their mistakes define yours. That conversation changed something in me. I realized I didn't have to accept my parents' version of reality. I could create my own path, and their opinion of me didn't matter. My aunt would call my parents once a week to give them updates on how I was doing. I'd hear her on the phone. He's doing well in school. Honor roll again. Yes, he's behaving himself. No, he hasn't asked about coming home. That last part was important, because after about 3 months, I realized I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to go back to a house where I was blamed for everything and appreciated for nothing. So when my aunt would relay messages from my parents asking when I wanted to visit, I'd tell her I was too busy with school. Christmas that first year was weird. My parents sent a package with some generic gifts, a sweater that was the wrong size, a gift card to a restaurant that didn't exist in Pennsylvania, and a card that said, "Hope you're learning and growing." No phone call, no video chat, nothing personal. Just a package that screamed, "We did the minimum required to pretend we care." I sent nothing back. Months turned into a year, and then another. My parents would occasionally call my aunt to ask about me, but they never asked to speak to me directly. I figured they were fine with the arrangement. I was out of sight, out of mind, and they could focus all their attention on fixing Jackson's life. Meanwhile, I was crushing it academically. I finished junior year with a 4.0 GPA. Senior year, I was taking every AP class available and scoring high on all the tests. I applied to colleges, writing my essay about overcoming adversity and learning self-reliance. I didn't mention my parents or Jackson by name, but anyone who read between the lines could figure out what had happened. I got accepted to a good state university with a partial scholarship. Not a full ride, but combined with student loans and a work-study program, I could make it work. When I told my aunt and uncle, they were thrilled. They offered to help with what the scholarship didn't cover, but I declined. I'd been saving every dollar I could from my part-time job at the library, and I was determined to do this on my own. My parents found out I'd been accepted to college when my aunt told them. My mom called the house, and my aunt handed me the phone. It was the first conversation I'd had with my mother in almost 2 years. "Congratulations on college," she said, her voice stiff. "Your father and I are very proud." I almost laughed. Proud of what? The kid they'd abandoned? The scapegoat they'd blamed for their golden child's mistakes? "Thanks," I said, keeping my voice neutral. There was a long pause. Then she said, "You know you're welcome to come home for a visit before you start school." "I'm good," I replied. "I've got a lot to prepare." Another pause. "Jackson's doing much better. He's back on track. We thought you'd want to know." What I wanted to say was, "I don't care." I wanted to say, "You blamed me for his mistakes and threw me away." I wanted to say, "You chose him over me, and you don't get to act like a proud parent now." Instead, I said, "That's great. I'm glad he's doing well. I have to go now." I hung up before she could respond. I left for college that fall and never looked back. I majored in pre-law with a minor in political science. I worked 2 part-time jobs throughout college to minimize my loans. One at the campus library, another at a local coffee shop near campus. Between classes, studying, and work, I had maybe 2 hours of free time per day. But I didn't mind. Staying busy meant less time to think about everything that had happened. I had a few friends, went on a few dates, had a semi-normal college experience. My roommate freshman year was a guy named Luis, who was studying engineering. We got along fine, mainly because we were both too busy to get into each other's business. He'd be up at 2 a.m. working on problem sets while I'd be reading case law. We'd occasionally grab food together or watch a game on weekends, but mostly we just coexisted in that easy way college roommates do. Sophomore year, I moved into an apartment with 3 other guys. It was cheaper than the dorms, and I could cook my own meals instead of paying for a meal plan. I learned to make decent food on a tight budget. Lots of rice, beans, chicken, pasta. Nothing fancy, but it was fuel. I dated a girl named Rebecca for most of junior year. She was sweet, studying to be a teacher. We met in a political science class and started studying together. Eventually, studying turned into coffee dates, which turned into actual dates. She met Aunt Julie once when she came to visit for Parents' Weekend. Julie loved her, said she was good for me. Rebecca and I broke up when she realized I was never going to introduce her to my parents. She couldn't understand why I didn't talk to my family. I tried explaining it once, the whole story about being blamed and sent away, but she came from one of those close, functional families where everyone loves each other and problems get talked through. She couldn't wrap her head around the idea of parents who would do what mine did. She suggested I work on forgiving them, maybe try family counseling. When I refused, she said I was holding on to anger that was only hurting me. We broke up about 2 weeks later. No hard feelings, just two people who couldn't understand each other's fundamental worldview. My focus was always on the long game, law school. I studied my behind off and made the dean's list every semester. I applied to law schools my senior year and got accepted to a good program. Not Harvard or Yale, but a solid school with a strong reputation. More loans, more work study, more grinding. But I was used to it by now. Hard work was my comfort zone. Law school was brutal. First year almost broke me with the workload and competition. The Socratic method, where professors randomly call on students to answer complex legal questions in front of the entire class, was designed to be intimidating, and it worked. I watched classmates drop out, switch to part-time programs, or have complete breakdowns in the library at 2 a.m. But I remembered sitting in that guest room in Pennsylvania, angry and isolated, and I used that memory as fuel. Every time I wanted to quit, and there were many times, I thought about my parents dismissing me, and it pushed me harder. When I was exhausted from pulling all-nighters to finish case briefs, I thought about that family meeting where they blamed me for Jackson's arrest. When I was stressed about exams, I remembered my mom's words about me being a bad influence. First year, I worked as a research assistant for one of my professors, helping compile case law for an article she was writing. Second year, I joined the criminal law clinic where law students work on actual cases under supervision. I represented clients who couldn't afford private attorneys, mostly juveniles accused of minor crimes. That's when I realized this was what I wanted to do with my career. Third year, I was editor of the Law Review, which meant even longer hours and less sleep. But I also secured a summer internship at a public defender's office, which gave me real courtroom experience. I watched seasoned attorneys fight for clients that society had written off. I saw kids who'd made stupid mistakes get second chances because someone believed in them enough to fight for them in court. I graduated in the top 10% of my class, passed the bar exam on my first try, which only about 60% of test takers accomplish, got hired by a small criminal defense firm that specialized in juvenile cases. The irony wasn't lost on me. The kid who got blamed for his brother's juvenile crime was now defending juveniles accused of crimes. My first year as an actual attorney was a learning curve. I lost cases I thought I'd win and won cases I thought were hopeless. But I learned fast. I learned how to read judges, how to cross-examine witnesses, how to find the holes in a prosecutor's case. I learned that sometimes the best outcome isn't an acquittal. It's getting your client into a treatment program instead of jail, or getting charges reduced so they don't have a felony on their record for the rest of their lives. I worked 60-hour weeks minimum. Some weeks it was closer to 80, but I loved it. Every kid I helped felt like a small victory against the system that had failed me. Every time I got a judge to see my client as a person and not just a case number, I felt like I was doing something that mattered. By year 3, I had a reputation. Other attorneys started referring clients to me. Judges knew my name. I'd built something real from absolutely nothing. During all this time, college, law school, studying for the bar, starting my career, my parents reached out maybe a dozen times total. Birthday cards with generic messages. The occasional email asking how school was going. Once, my dad called to tell me my grandmother had passed away. But we never had real conversations. They never apologized. They never acknowledged what they'd done. And I never reached out to them either. Why would I? They'd made their choice years ago. I heard through my aunt, who I stayed in close contact with, that Jackson had graduated high school, gone to community college for a year, dropped out, and was now working retail management. He'd never left our hometown. My parents still treated him like he could do no wrong, apparently. Good for him, I guess. We hadn't spoken since the day I left their house. Fast forward to 3 months ago. I'm 29 now, 3 years into my career as a defense attorney. I've built up a decent reputation in juvenile criminal defense. I win most of my cases, and the ones I don't win usually end with reduced sentences. I'm not rich by any means, but I'm doing well. I have my own apartment, I can pay my bills, and I've almost paid off my student loans. One Tuesday morning, I'm at my desk reviewing case files when my secretary tells me I have a walk-in consultation. The name on the intake form was Janet and David Stevens, my parents' names. But it didn't register at first because Stevens is a common last name. I told her to send them in, and when my office door opened and I looked up for my paperwork, I found myself staring at my mother and father. 13 years older, a lot grayer, but definitely them. The look of shock on their faces was priceless. My mom actually gasped. My dad's mouth literally fell open. They stood frozen in the doorway like they'd seen a ghost. For me, the moment was surreal. I'd imagined running into them hundreds of times over the years. In my imagination, I'd always had the perfect thing to say, The perfect way to make them understand what they'd done to me. But now that the moment was actually here, I found myself feeling strangely calm, detached almost. They looked older, obviously. My mom's hair had gone mostly gray, and she'd gained some weight. My dad had aged harder, deeper lines around his eyes, thinner hair, that worn-down look that comes from years of stress. They were dressed like they were going to church or a funeral. My dad in a button-down and slacks, my mom in a conservative dress. Formal clothes for a serious meeting. And I just sat there, pen in hand, looking at them like they were any other potential clients. "Mr. and Mrs. Stevens," I said, my voice perfectly professional. "Please, have a seat." They stood frozen in the doorway. My mom found her voice first. "Danny, is that really you?" Danny. They hadn't called me that since I was a kid. I'd been going by Daniel professionally for years. Hearing that old nickname felt like someone dragging nails across a chalkboard. "It's Daniel now," I corrected, keeping my tone neutral. "And yes, it's me. You're here for a consultation?" They stumbled into the chairs across from my desk, like they'd forgotten how legs worked. My dad kept staring at me like I was a ghost. My mom had tears in her eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were from shock or some other emotion. Maybe guilt, maybe fear. Who knows? The office felt too small suddenly. My professional space, the one place I felt completely in control, now contained the two people who'd made me feel most powerless. But I had the desk between us, my law degree on the wall behind me, my name on the door. This was my territory now, not theirs. "We had no idea," my mom stammered. "We've been looking for a defense attorney for weeks, and someone recommended this firm, and we just made the appointment, and we didn't know it would be you." Her voice trailed off. She was looking at me like she was seeing me for the first time, taking in the professional clothes, the organized desk, the framed law degree from a school they didn't even know I'd attended. "Interesting," I said, still keeping my tone neutral and professional. "Let's talk about why you need a defense attorney." They exchanged glances. Finally, my dad cleared his throat and said the words I'd been waiting 13 years to hear. "It's Jackson. He's been arrested." I raised my eyebrows, pretending to be surprised. "I see. What are the charges?" My mom burst into tears. Real ones this time. Ugly crying that she tried to muffle with a tissue. My dad looked like he'd aged another 10 years right there in my office. "Embezzlement," he said quietly, "from his employer. About $45,000 over the course of 2 years. I nodded, making notes on my legal pad. "That's a serious charge. Was he caught with evidence, or is this accusatory?" "They have evidence," my dad admitted. "Bank records, forged invoices, the whole thing. His lawyer says he's looking at 2 to 5 years in prison if convicted." "His lawyer?" I asked. "So he already has representation?" "A public defender," my mom sobbed. "But they don't care about him. They just want him to take a plea deal. We need someone who will actually fight for him. Someone who understands he's a good person who made mistakes." I wrote down more notes, mainly to give myself time to process this absolute insanity. Jackson had been arrested for a serious crime. My parents were desperate enough to seek help from a private attorney. And somehow, through sheer cosmic justice, they'd ended up in my office. "I see," I said finally. "And you want to hire me to defend your son Jackson against embezzlement charges?" "Yes," my dad said quickly. "We know this is awkward, given our history, but you're his brother, and someone told us you're one of the best juvenile defense attorneys in the area, and we thought—" "I don't handle adult cases," I interrupted. "My specialty is juvenile criminal defense. Your son is, 27 now? That's outside my area of expertise." The hope that had briefly appeared in my mom's eyes died. "Oh, we didn't realize." "However," I continued, "I do know several excellent criminal defense attorneys who handle white-collar crimes. I'd be happy to give you some referrals." I pulled out a legal pad and started writing down names and phone numbers of attorneys I knew and respected. Good lawyers who would give Jackson a fair shot if he was willing to work with them. As I wrote, my mom finally said what I'd been waiting to hear. "Daniel, we're so sorry. We had no idea you'd become an attorney. We're so proud of you." I looked up from my writing. 13 years. 13 years of silence. Of being treated like I didn't exist. Of them choosing Jackson over me again and again. And now, when they needed something, suddenly they were proud? "With all due respect, Mrs. Stevens," I said, my voice still professional, but with an edge to it now. "You've had 13 years to be proud of me. You had 13 years to apologize, to reach out, to acknowledge that what you did to me was wrong. You chose not to." My dad shifted uncomfortably. "We thought you needed space. We thought you wanted to be on your own." "No," I said firmly. "You blamed me for Jackson's mistakes and threw me away because it was easier than holding your golden child accountable. And now that he's in trouble again, you show up at my office asking for help. The irony is almost poetic. We made mistakes, my mom whispered. We know that now. We should have handled things differently back then. But please, he's still your brother. I finished writing the referrals and slid the paper across my desk. These are 3 excellent attorneys. Any of them would be a good fit for Jackson's case. I'll make a note in their files that you're coming on my recommendation. That's it? My dad asked. You're not going to... You're just giving us referrals? What exactly did you expect? I asked. That I'd drop everything to save the brother who sat silently while you blame me for his crimes? The brother who never once reached out in 13 years? The parents who chose him over me at every opportunity? We're family, my mom said desperately. Family, I repeated, tasting the word. You know what I learned while I was living with Aunt Julie and Uncle Robert? Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up for you. It's about who believes in you when things are hard. They were more family to me in 1 year than you were in 16. The silence in my office was heavy. Outside, I could hear phones ringing and people talking, normal office sounds. But in here, it felt like time had stopped. Finally, I stood up, signaling that the consultation was over. I genuinely hope Jackson gets a good attorney and a fair outcome. Nobody deserves to have their life destroyed over mistakes. But I'm not that attorney, and I'm not going to pretend we're a family who can just move past 13 years of you treating me like I didn't exist. My parents stood slowly. My mom was still crying. My dad looked like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. As they reached the door, my mom turned back one more time. For what it's worth, we really are proud of you. Look at everything you've accomplished. I accomplished it without you, I replied. That's the part you need to understand. I survived being thrown away by my family at 16. I put myself through college and law school. I built this career from nothing, with no help from you. So yeah, I'm proud of myself too, but you don't get credit for that. They left without another word. I sat back down at my desk and stared at the closed door for a long time. Part of me felt guilty. They'd looked so desperate, so broken. But the bigger part of me felt vindicated. They'd come looking for the son they'd thrown away, hoping he'd save the son they'd protected, and learned that the throwaway son had become someone they needed. My secretary knocked and poked her head in. You okay? That seemed intense. Yeah, I said, surprising myself by smiling. I'm actually really okay. Were those the parents you told me about once? The ones who sent you away? I nodded. They didn't recognize me until they walked into my office. They'd been looking for a good defense attorney for their other son and ended up here. She whistled low. That's some karma right there. Yeah, I agreed. Some karma. I heard through the grapevine, one of the attorneys I'd referred them to, that Jackson did end up taking a plea deal. He got 18 months in minimum security and 5 years probation. Not a great outcome, but better than it could have been. The attorney told me my parents had asked about me, wanted to know if there was any way to reconnect. I told him to tell them I appreciated the thought, but no. About a month after that office visit, I got a letter in the mail. My mother's handwriting on the envelope. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was 4 pages long. She apologized for everything, for blaming me, for sending me away, for not staying in contact, for choosing Jackson over me repeatedly. She explained that they'd been in denial about Jackson's issues, that they'd been terrible parents to me, that they'd realized too late how badly they'd messed up. She said she understood if I never wanted to see them again, but that she wanted me to know how sorry they were. She included photos, pictures of me at graduation, at my first job, things that Aunt Julie must have sent them over the years. She'd kept them in an album, apparently. I read the letter twice, then put it in my desk drawer. Didn't respond. Haven't responded. Don't plan to. 3 weeks after that letter arrived, my secretary buzzed me. Your mother is online too. Should I tell her you're in a meeting? I stared at the blinking light on my phone for a solid 30 seconds. Then I picked up. Daniel Stevens, I said, keeping it professional. Daniel, it's Mom. Her voice was shaky. I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I need to tell you something about Jackson. He took the plea deal. I already know. One of the attorneys I referred you to mentioned it. It's not that. She paused. He wrote you a letter, asked me to mail it to you. I have your office address from the business card you gave us. Don't send it, I said. He's really struggling with this, Daniel. He wants to apologize for everything, for not defending you back then, for... I don't care what he wants to apologize for. I cut her off. You need to understand something. I'm not holding on to anger. I'm not waiting for apologies. I've moved on. My life is good. You're not part of it, and Jackson isn't part of it. That's not punishment. That's just reality. She was quiet for a moment. Then, We destroyed our relationship with you. I understand that now. But he's still your brother. No, I said calmly. He's a guy I used to know who shares my DNA. That's it. I hope his time in prison helps him figure his life out. But I'm not his support system, and I'm not yours. Can we at least meet for coffee sometime? Just to talk? No. Goodbye, Mrs. Stevens. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking a little, but I felt okay. Clearer, actually. That was 8 months ago. They haven't tried contacting me since. Jackson started his sentence in February. I heard through my attorney contact that he's doing fine in minimum security. My parents visit him every week, apparently. Good for them. That's what parents are supposed to do. Show up for their kids. Meanwhile, I got promoted to senior associate at my firm last month. Bigger office, better cases, significant raise. I'm working on a case right now that could set a precedent for juvenile sentencing reform in our state. It's the kind of case that could define a career. Aunt Julie and Uncle Robert drove 8 hours to take me out for a celebration dinner when I got promoted. Uncle Robert gave me a pen, one of those expensive ones lawyers use, with my name engraved on it. For signing all those important legal documents, he said, grinning. They're the ones who were there when I graduated college. They're the ones who helped me move into my first apartment. They're the ones who call me every Sunday just to check in. That's what family looks like. And it has nothing to do with blood. Last week, I was in court representing a 16-year-old kid who'd been caught with his older brother's illegal substances. The prosecutor wanted to charge him as an adult. The kid swore he didn't know what was in the bag his brother asked him to hold. His parents believed him. I believed him too. I got the charges reduced to a misdemeanor, with probation and mandatory counseling. The kid gets to finish high school without a felony record. His parents hugged me in the hallway outside the courtroom, crying with relief. That case was personal for me. Different circumstances, same dynamic. Younger kid getting blamed for the older one's mess. Except this kid had parents who fought for him instead of throwing him away. I made sure to tell them that. Keep believing in him, I said. Keep showing up. That's what matters. The mom looked at me and said, "You're an amazing attorney. Your parents must be so proud." I smiled. The people who matter are proud. That's enough. So that's where things stand. My parents know where I am, but can't reach me. Jackson's serving his time. I'm building a career helping kids who actually need someone in their corner. And Aunt Julie just texted me asking what I want for my birthday dinner next month. I won, Reddit. Not because I got revenge or made them suffer. I won because I built a life so good that their absence doesn't hurt anymore. I'm not the kid they threw away. I'm the man they'll never get to know. And honestly, I'm completely fine with that. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks. When I proposed at a family cookout, my dad snatched the ring and said, "Save it for your brother. He's the one who deserves it." I walked out, cut them off, built my life. Then they came crawling back with apologies. Hey, Reddit, this isn't one of those "we had our differences, but deep down, they loved me" stories. My parents made it clear from day one that my brother was star and I just exist. What happened next? Let's just say the ending isn't what my parents expected. My name's Lucas. I grew up in a house where there were 2 sons, but only 1 star. My brother Marcus was the star. He was the tall one, the athletic one, the one everybody looked at when we walked into a room. I was just the other kid. Even when we were little, it was obvious. My dad, Joseph, used to say things like, "Marcus was born ready for the big stuff." My mom, Eleanor, would nod like she was agreeing with a news report. They didn't say much about me. If they did, it was usually, "Lucas is quiet." In the baby album, my hospital bracelet photo is labeled Baby B in a different handwriting. Marcus's page has a caption and a smiley face. Mine doesn't. In middle school, I entered this city science fair. I stayed up for weeks building a little motor from scratch. It wasn't much, but it ran. I got 3rd place. The teacher said it was one of the better projects that year. Nobody from my family came to see it. They said they were busy with Marcus's soccer practice. He was a striker, by the way. Fast kid, always scoring goals. My dad said you can't miss a game because scouts could be watching. This was 7th grade. There were no scouts. Marcus got a whole pizza party after one game where he scored twice. I got a good job when I came home with my little science fair ribbon. They didn't even hang it up. It sat on my dresser until it got lost. When I brought it up once, Dad said, "Well, Marcus is always out there. People see him. He represents the family." He actually said, "represents the family," like we were a business. Meanwhile, I was just trying to make sure my shoes didn't squeak because they were too cheap. The only person who really noticed was my best friend George. We called him Georgie because he hated it. He had this old blue bike with one handlebar wrapped in duct tape. He didn't care what people thought. He saw right through my parents' nonsense too. He was the first one I told about Luna later on. I met Luna when I was 16, working weekends at this local grocery store. She was in charge of the bakery section. I was bagging groceries. She had this way of asking real questions. Not like, how's it going? But, what do you actually want to do after school? I didn't know what to say at first because nobody really asked me that before. My parents always talked about Marcus's future. Scholarships, sports, college visits. Me? They said, you'll figure something out. Luna didn't act like that. She actually listened when I talked about maybe wanting to do something with computers, maybe learn to code or fix things. She said, you'd be good at that. Simple, but it stuck with me. One year, we had this joint birthday party. Marcus and me, same day obviously. 16 candles each, big deal, right? They handed Marcus the keys to a used dirt bike. Everyone cheered. I got a $20 gift card to a bookstore. My dad said, equal value, different interests. I'm pretty sure a dirt bike costs more than 20 bucks, but whatever. Even Marcus looked awkward about it. He handed me one of his cupcakes like it was some kind of peace offering. By the time high school rolled around, I had this quiet plan in my head. Graduate, save up, leave. Every soccer trophy Marcus brought home made it clearer. Every time Dad said, Marcus makes us proud, it got sharper. It wasn't even Marcus's fault. He was just living his life. But I couldn't picture staying in that house one day longer than I had to. The only thing that made it easier back then was Luna. She'd walk home with me after shifts, carrying a bag of leftover bread the bakery was going to toss out. We'd eat it on the curb, talk about music, talk about anything but family stuff. She once said, you're way too calm about how they treat you. I told her, what's the point of yelling? They wouldn't hear it anyway. But in my head, I was already counting the days. High school was when everything really started to split apart. Marcus became this local legend on the soccer field. Friday nights, the whole school would show up to watch him play. Parents yelling from the bleachers, girls in his jersey number, teachers talking about college potential. Me? I was usually in the computer lab after school or working extra shifts at the grocery store. Nobody cheered for that. One spring, I got invited to this regional STEM thing through school. Basically, they picked a few kids from each district to visit the university labs, see experiments, meet professors. I was pumped. I told my parents a month in advance. The night before, Mom said, we can't drive you. Marcus has a game in Riverdale. That was 40 minutes in the opposite direction. I said I could probably get a ride with George. She said, do that then. They didn't ask how it went when I got back. Meanwhile, Marcus scored 2 goals that night, and Dad told the story 3 times over dinner the next day. George was the only one who actually cared about my thing. He asked about the labs, the machines, the robots they showed us. He joked that I'd be building laser eyes for cats one day. It was dumb, but it felt good having someone in my corner. Luna asked too, later. We were closing up the grocery store when she said, so, did the professor people like you? I told her one of them said I should apply for the summer coding program. You gonna do it? She asked. Maybe, I said. Truth was, I didn't even know how I'd pay for the bus to get there. One night after another, one of Marcus's games, we were all in the kitchen. Marcus was sweaty, still in his jersey, holding this shiny MVP medal. Dad kept talking like recruiters had him on speed dial, like Marcus was about to sign a pro contract at 17. I mentioned the summer coding program just to see if anyone cared. Mom said, that's nice, without looking up from the dishes. Dad said, how much does it cost? I told him the fee. He whistled like I'd said $10,000. It wasn't even that much. Maybe next year, he said. Right now we have tournament fees coming up for Marcus's. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. Luna heard about the whole thing from me later, and started this little jar at her place. She threw in tips from the bakery. I added my grocery store money. George tossed in coins from fixing bikes around the neighborhood. By the deadline, we actually had enough. I signed up. My parents never asked how I got in. Senior year rolled around and things just kept stacking up. College mail started coming in. Marcus got letters from state universities about playing soccer. He signed with state on a soccer scholarship for the fall. I got a full tuition scholarship for computer science because of a project I did at the summer program. When I told Mom, she smiled politely and said, that's good, Lucas. Then immediately asked Marcus if he needed new cleats for the fall season. Marcus tried talking to me a couple times that spring. Not about the parents, just random stuff. College plans, Luna, whatever. We weren't close, but he wasn't cruel either. It was like we lived parallel lives in the same house. One night he said, you know Dad brags about you sometimes at work, right? About the computer stuff? I shrugged. Never heard it here. He didn't argue. He just nodded like he already knew. By the time graduation came, I had an envelope with some saved up cash, a bus schedule, and a friend with a spare couch in another city. The plan was set. We sort of graduation day was supposed to be a big deal. For once, I thought maybe things would feel even. Both their sons, same ceremony, same day, same stage. But deep down, I already knew how it would go. The morning started with Marcus getting ready in the living room, fixing his tie in the mirror while Mom adjusted his collar like he was about to meet the president. Dad kept saying, "Big day for the family," over and over. I was in the hallway waiting my turn, holding my gown on a plastic hanger. Nobody noticed. We got there late because Dad wanted to swing by and grab donuts for the road, but ended up chatting with the cashier about Marcus's last soccer season. By the time we parked, the ceremony had already started. We had to walk past rows of seated families while everyone turned to look. I lined up with the other grads, Luna and George waving from the crowd. My parents sat in the back, Dad craning his neck only when Marcus's name was close. They'd shown up late, the donut stop, and were still shuffling to the back when my name got called. If they clapped, I didn't see it. They called me up for my computer science scholarship. I walked across the stage, shook hands, smiled for the picture. The applause was polite, quick. 5 minutes later, Marcus walked up for his sports award, and the place went wild. People stood. The announcer made a joke about future pro athlete right here. Cameras flashed. My parents were on their feet like they were at a concert. After the ceremony, everyone gathered outside for photos. I tried to get one with both my parents, but they were too busy with Marcus and some local reporter who wanted a quote for the school newsletter. I ended up in one group shot where I'm half hidden behind Marcus's shoulder. We went to dinner after. Big family table, cousins, neighbors. Even Marcus's coach showed up. It was noisy, everyone laughing, telling stories. I sat at the end next to George. When the food came out, Dad stood up with this big grin. He held up a small box and said, "For Marcus, our pride and joy, here's something for your future." He handed over a set of car keys. Everyone clapped as Marcus held them up. "First real car, son," Dad said, clapping him on the back. "You'll need it for college, for your games, for life." Then Dad turned to me like he just remembered I existed. He slid a smaller box down the table. "And for Lucas, something useful too." I opened it. A watch. Cheap leather band, brand name I'd never heard of. He said, "Now you won't be late to your classes," like it was a joke. People chuckled politely. Luna squeezed my hand under the table. George muttered something about Dad needing glasses. I put the watch back in the box. "Thanks," I said, because what else was I supposed to say? George leaned over and whispered, "That thing probably loses time." I almost laughed but didn't. Marcus looked uncomfortable, turning the car keys in his hand like he didn't want them anymore. He said, "Maybe we should have split the cost or something." Dad waved him off. "Don't be silly. You'll need it more. Lucas doesn't even drive." It was true, but still. After dinner, people gathered in the parking lot talking about Marcus's future. Some uncle was saying he'd make the draft one day. Mom nodded like it was already decided. Nobody asked about my college plans. Not once. Luna finally spoke up. "Lucas got a scholarship too, you know. A full one for computer science." Mom smiled vaguely. "Oh, that's nice." Then turned back to the soccer talk. That was the moment I knew for sure. I was done. We drove home, everyone tired from the day. Marcus tried talking to me about the car, about maybe sharing it sometimes. I said, "It's yours. Don't worry about it." I went to my room, grabbed the envelope with my saved-up cash, and started packing a duffel bag. Luna had already talked to her cousin in the city about me crashing on his couch for a while. Job leads, bus routes, everything lined up. I didn't slam doors or make speeches. I just packed. Around midnight, Dad knocked. "What are you doing?" "Leaving tomorrow," I said. He frowned. "You don't have to rush out. We can help you get set up." I zipped the bag. "I've got it covered." He stood there like he wanted to say something else but didn't. Eventually, he walked away. I left at sunrise while everyone slept. Slipped the watch back on the kitchen counter. Took the bus to the city with George helping carry my stuff. Luna met us there with coffee and a smile that felt like a fresh start. I didn't text my parents when I got to the new place. I didn't post about it online. I just unpacked my things, sat on the lumpy couch, and let the silence settle in. It felt like the first real choice I'd made for myself. That fall, I started at the state university on the full tuition scholarship, commuting from our apartment and taking a lot of classes online so I could keep working. I stayed away for months after moving out. No calls, no visits, nothing. Luna and I built our own little life in the city. Cheap apartment, secondhand furniture, long hours at work, but it felt like ours. Then came the message from Mom. Family cookout next Saturday. Everyone's coming. Marcus will be there too. I ignored it at first. Then Marcus texted me. Just come, man. It's been a while. He didn't beg, just said he wanted me there. Said maybe things would be different. I wasn't convinced, but Luna thought maybe it was worth showing up. So we went. The backyard was full when we arrived. Cousins, neighbors, even some of Marcus's old teammates. Big table piled with food, music playing, kids running around. Dad was by the grill, Mom directing traffic like she owned the place. We said hello to a few people, found a spot near the edge. Marcus came over, grinning. Glad you made it, he said. He didn't look fake about it either. I told him thanks. He leaned closer. You gonna do it today? Yeah, I said. My hand went to my pocket where the ring was. Luna didn't know exactly when I planned to propose, just that it would be today. I figured doing it here might be a step toward making peace. Maybe show my parents I was serious about my own life. An hour in, people started settling with plates of food. Kids sat on the grass, adults in lawn chairs. I got up, cleared my throat. Hey everyone, I said. Can I get your attention for a minute? People turned. Luna looked confused, then realized what was happening. I started talking about how much she meant to me, how she stuck with me through everything. My voice shook a little, but I kept going. I pulled the ring from my pocket and got down on one knee. That's when Dad walked over. He didn't smile. He didn't clap. He just reached down, took the ring right out of my hand, held it up like it was his. Let's not waste this, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. Save it for Marcus. He'll be married first, like he should be. The whole yard went silent. Luna froze. My ears rang. Marcus stood up so fast his chair fell over. What the hell, Dad? Dad waved him off. I'm just saying, you're the one with a real future. Career, stability. You should be the first to start a family, not your brother here still figuring things out. I stood up. Give me the ring. Mom came over, arms crossed. Your father's right, Lucas. It's too soon for you. You barely have anything saved. Marriage takes money, planning. Marcus is settled. It makes sense for him to go first. Marcus moved between us. You two need to stop. He loves her. That's enough reason. Dad scoffed. Love doesn't pay bills. Marcus knows that. He thinks ahead. That's why we support him the way we do. I felt my hands shake. You mean the way you never supported me? Mom snapped back instantly. Oh, here we go again. Always playing the victim. We gave you what we could. Marcus turned on her. No, you didn't. Don't even try that. I saw it my whole life. Him getting scraps while I got everything. Dad's face reddened. You earned what you got. He didn't. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. Yeah, I forgot the part where being born less athletic means I deserved nothing. Mom raised her voice. You think life's been unfair to you? We kept a roof over your head, food on the table. Plenty of parents do less. Plenty of parents don't humiliate their kid in front of 50 people, Marcus shot back. Give him the damn ring. Dad still held it like it was his to give. He's not ready. Luna finally spoke. Her voice was calm but sharp. With all due respect, this isn't your decision. If Lucas isn't ready, that's for him to figure out. Not you. Some relatives shifted uncomfortably. A few walked toward the house like they didn't want to watch. I stepped closer. Last time. Give me the ring. Dad stared at me for a long second, then finally dropped it in my hand. Fine, he said. Throw your life away if you want. I put it back in my pocket. My hands were steady now. I'll throw away your opinion before I throw away my life. Marcus muttered, good, under his breath. Mom shook her head like she couldn't believe we were all ungrateful. One day you'll realize we were right, she said. I looked at Marcus. Did you ever ask to be first? For any of this? He shook his head. Never. I just wanted to play soccer. I didn't ask for the car, the money, the attention. I told them more than once to split things fair. They didn't listen. Dad pointed at him. You deserved it, Marcus. Don't act like you didn't. Marcus looked tired suddenly. Maybe I did, but so did he. Nobody said anything after that. The music had stopped. Kids were staring. Luna touched my arm gently, like asking if I still wanted to do this. I shook my head. Not today. We left without eating. Marcus followed us to the driveway. I'm sorry, he said. They're impossible sometimes. I told him it wasn't his fault, but in my head, I knew things had just broken in a way they wouldn't fix anytime soon. After the cookout disaster, I blocked my parents on everything. Calls, texts, social media, gone. Luna didn't argue. She just nodded like she'd been waiting for me to finally cut the cord. Marcus tried reaching out a couple of times, apologizing for them, saying he didn't agree with any of it. I believed him. He was the only one in that house who ever seemed to notice the way things really were. But I didn't go back. I poured everything into work and school. I was still at the grocery store part-time, but I started doing computer repair gigs for cash. George spread the word around, and soon I had enough clients to quit the store job. Luna worked mornings at the bakery and evenings helping a catering company. We barely saw each other some days, but when we did, it felt like progress. Bills got paid on time. We even saved a little each month. I enrolled at the state university on the full tuition scholarship, stacking evening and online CS classes while working. Nothing fancy at first, just intro courses, but it felt like I was finally heading somewhere. Every time I fixed a laptop or wrote a small script that actually worked, it felt like I was peeling away another layer of my parents' voices, telling me I wasn't good enough. We had this tiny apartment over a laundromat. The walls were thin, and the plumbing rattled when someone upstairs showered, but it was ours. Luna found a couch on some yard sale app for $20. George helped carry it up the stairs, grumbling the whole way, but refusing to let me lift the heavy side. "You're the brains," he said, wiping sweat off his forehead. "I'm the brawn." The thing sagged in the middle, but it was better than sitting on the floor. One night after a long day, Luna came home with a bag of day-old bread from the bakery like she always did. We sat on the couch, eating sandwiches and talking about maybe doing a small wedding. Nothing big, just her family, George, a couple of close friends. "Your parents won't like that," she said carefully. I laughed. "They're not invited." She didn't push back. She knew why. We booked the courthouse date 2 weeks later. I texted Marcus directly the next day. "Hey," I wrote, "small wedding coming up. Just us, Luna's family, George. No drama. You're welcome if you want." He called right away. "You sure about inviting me?" "If Mom and Dad find out." "They won't," I said. "It's your choice, man. I just want you there, if you can make it." Marcus paused for a second. "I'll try. Seriously, I want to be there." On the morning of the wedding, he called again. "Lucas, I'm stuck out of town for work. Won't make it back in time. I'm sorry, man." "It's fine," I said. "No pressure. I'm proud of you, you know," he said. "Ignore whatever they think. Do your thing." After his first season, he left state and took a field rep job with a sporting goods company. The role kept him on the road most weeks, bouncing between schools and tournaments. So it ended up just being Luna's family, George, and a couple of friends. Courthouse vows, simple rings, photos on someone's phone. George was my witness. Her mom cried happy tears. My side of the aisle was empty, and honestly, it didn't bother me at all. When we got back to her parents' place for dinner, my phone buzzed. "Marcus, congrats, man. I wish I was there. You deserve this." I believed him. A week after the wedding, Marcus called me. "They know," he said. "I didn't tell them. Someone in the family must have. Mom's been pacing all morning. Dad's on a warpath." I wasn't surprised. I figured they'd find out eventually. I didn't expect the knock on our apartment door that night, though. It was them. Dad and Mom standing in the hallway like they owned the place. Luna froze beside me. "Married?" Dad started before he even stepped inside. "You went and got married behind our backs?" "Yeah," I said. "We did." Mom's voice was sharp. "After everything we've done for you? This is how you repay us? Sneaking off like criminals?" I laughed once. "Everything you've done for me? Like the cookout? Like graduation?" Dad cut in, louder now. "You embarrassed this family. Marriage isn't some backyard game, Lucas. You think you can just run off with the first girl who says yes?" Luna spoke up then. "Actually, it's our life, not yours." Mom ignored her completely. "Marcus would have done this right. Big ceremony, proper announcements, family involved. Not this secret little stunt." Marcus, who'd come with them, finally snapped. "Would you stop comparing everything to me? He doesn't owe you a show. None of this is about you." Dad turned on him. "Don't start. You know we expected better from both of you." Marcus stepped forward. "No, you expected control. That's all this is. He didn't do it your way, so now you're throwing a fit." Mom shook her head like he was speaking another language. "Families are supposed to be involved in these decisions." I said, "Families are supposed to support their kids. You never did that for me. Not once." Dad pointed at me. "We kept food on the table." "That's the bare minimum," Marcus shot back. "You want a trophy for feeding him?" The room went dead quiet after that. Mom's eyes narrowed. "One day you'll both regret this. Cutting us out like we're strangers." I said, "Maybe, but it won't be today." They left without another word, the door slamming behind them. Marcus stayed behind, looking tired. "I'm sorry, man. They just Don't get it. I told him it wasn't on him to apologize. He wasn't the problem. The next few months blurred into work, classes, and fixing up the apartment. I bought a secondhand desk for $50 and set up a little workspace in the corner. Started taking on more complex repair jobs. Some nights I stayed up late watching tutorials, Luna asleep on the couch beside me. Marcus visited once, bringing takeout. He looked around the apartment like he was seeing my life for the first time. Mom says you're ignoring them, he said carefully. I shrugged. They earned it. He nodded. Yeah, they did. Summer came, and with it, bigger repair jobs. A small business hired me to fix their office computers. Paid well too. Enough that Luna and I started looking at bigger apartments, someplace not over a laundromat. One evening, we sat on the couch eating cheap takeout when George came by with a used bookshelf he found online. We set it up in the corner, and Luna filled it with secondhand books and a couple of framed photos from the wedding. It was the first time our place actually felt like a home. Then, out of nowhere, Marcus called one night. His voice was tight. Dad had a heart attack, he said. He's in the hospital. For a second, I didn't say anything. Marcus went on. He's okay. They say it wasn't massive, but they want to see you. Luna looked at me from across the room, waiting. I told Marcus I'd think about it and hung up. I didn't owe them anything, but part of me wanted to hear whatever excuse they had left. The next afternoon, I walked into the hospital room. Dad was sitting up in bed, pale but awake. Mom was in the chair beside him, arms crossed, looking like she was holding a grudge against the air itself. Marcus stood near the window. He gave me a quick nod. Dad cleared his throat. You came. I'm not here for small talk, I said. Say what you need to say. Mom glared at me, but Marcus spoke first. Maybe just let him talk, okay? Dad looked down at his hands. We only ever wanted one child, he said finally. We found out we were having twins, and it wasn't the plan. I didn't move. So, he said slowly. We decided early on we'd keep one. The stronger one. The one we thought had the best shot. I felt my jaw tighten. You mean Marcus? He nodded like it was a fact, not an apology. You were smaller. Sick a lot as a baby. We even had a family lined up to adopt you. Marcus turned from the window. You never told me that. Dad rubbed his face. They backed out. Said they couldn't split twins. After that, no one else wanted to take just one baby. So we kept you both. And treated us like we weren't equal, I said. He didn't argue. We thought focusing on Marcus made sense. He was healthy, athletic. People liked him. We figured giving him more would pay off for the family. Mom finally spoke. We gave you a home. We didn't have to do more than that. Marcus snapped then. Do you even hear yourselves? You treated him like a spare part. Dad looked at him tiredly. We thought changing things later would hurt you. You were used to the attention. He wasn't. We didn't want to disrupt what worked. I laughed once, sharp and ugly. Worked for who? Certainly not for me. Dad winced but didn't back down. After the heart attack, I booked us with a family therapist. It was my idea. We see it now. The favoritism. The damage. We were wrong. I stared at him. You think admitting this erases it? No, he said. But I don't want to leave things like this. I don't want to go without you knowing the truth. Mom still hadn't softened. We did what we thought was best. You don't have to like it. Marcus turned on her. Best for who, Mom? Because it sure wasn't best for him. Or me, honestly. You think I liked being the golden child? You made me feel like if I ever screwed up, I'd lose everything too. That shut her up for the first time all day. I looked at Marcus. Did you know any of this? He shook his head. I knew they were unfair. I didn't know they tried to give you away. Dad leaned back against the pillows like the confession had taken everything out of him. I can't undo it. I want a chance to make things right now. I stood there for a long moment. You don't get to decide that. I do. He nodded slowly. I understand. I turned to leave, but Marcus stopped me at the door. You okay? No, I said. But I'm done letting them control the story. We walked out together, leaving our parents in that room with their choices. A few months passed after the hospital visit. I kept my distance. They had their confession, and I had my answer. That didn't erase anything. Life moved on. Luna and I found a slightly bigger apartment closer to the bus lines. After a couple of semesters, I got a steady IT job through one of the small businesses I'd done freelance work for. It paid enough to cover bills, savings, and even a decent used car. Then Marcus called one evening. I'm getting engaged, he said. I told him congratulations, and I meant it. He hesitated before adding, They want you there. Mom and Dad. They said they'll behave. I laughed quietly. That'll be the day, he sighed. Look, I get it. I really do. But I want you there because you're my brother, not because of them. So Luna and I went. The engagement party was huge. Catered food, music, people dressed like it was a wedding already. Dad and Mom were there, but they kept their distance at first. They'd been in counseling since the hospital, and for once it actually showed. Marcus spotted us, grinning. "You made it," he said, hugging me like he hadn't done since we were kids. Luna handed his fiancée a small gift we'd picked out together. They both looked genuinely happy. Halfway through the night, Dad finally came over. He looked older than I remembered. "Lucas," he said carefully. "Thanks for coming." I nodded. "I'm here for Marcus." He didn't argue, didn't try to make it about him. That was new. Mom came next. "We'd like to meet Luna properly sometime," she said. Her voice wasn't warm, but it wasn't icy either. Luna gave a polite smile. "Maybe." It was the kind of answer that said, "You're not owed this." Later, Marcus pulled me aside. The music was loud, people laughing in the background. "I need to say something," he said. "I know you went through hell with them. I saw it. I didn't stop it enough. I was the favorite, and I let it slide because it was easier for me. You were a kid," I said. "It wasn't your job to fix it. Still," he said, shaking his head, "you deserved better. Way better." I told him the truth. "I don't want an apology from you. I just want us to be brothers, without all the garbage they built between us." He nodded slowly. "I want that too." It was the first real conversation we'd had as equals. Toward the end of the night, Dad finally approached me. "I know we can't change the past," he said, voice low, "but we'd like to be part of your life now. Both of you. If you'll let us." I looked him dead in the eye. "Here's how this goes. No insults, no comparisons. You treat me, Luna, and any kids we might have with respect. Every time. No slip-ups, no excuses. You show up right, or you don't show up at all." He nodded slowly. "And understand this," I added. My voice stayed steady, but there was no give in it. "This isn't me asking for anything. I built my life without you. I don't need a redo. You want to be in it, you follow my rules. You earn your place. Otherwise, stay out." He didn't argue. Couldn't. For once, they just listened. On the drive home, Luna asked how I felt. "Lighter," I said, and I meant it. We got back to our apartment and unpacked the leftovers Marcus sent with us. I hung up the one decent photo someone took of us at the wedding. Me, Luna, Marcus, his fiancée, all smiling like normal people. The next weekend, I built a bookshelf for the second bedroom we were turning into an office. Hung my old scholarship certificate above it. Straight this time, not crooked like it used to be at my parents' place. Not because I needed to prove anything anymore, but because it was mine, and this was my life now. Over the next year, my parents called a few times. Never demanding, never insulting. Sometimes just to ask how work was going, or to wish Luna happy birthday. I didn't trust it right away, but I noticed they actually listened now. They sent Christmas cards for the first time ever. Wrote both our names on them. It didn't fix things. Some stuff doesn't get fixed, but it made life quieter, cleaner. Marcus got married that spring. Big wedding, all the family there, even us. No speeches comparing us. No weird tension. Just a normal day where nobody was fighting for once. At the reception, he raised his glass and said, "To my brother Lucas, for showing me what standing your ground looks like." People clapped. I didn't make a speech back. I just clinked my glass with Luna's and enjoyed the moment. Back home that night, Luna asked if I thought things were better now. "Better," I said. "Not perfect, but better." I didn't need more than that. Because the truth was, I'd already built my own life. One they couldn't control, couldn't take credit for, couldn't ruin. And that was enough. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way. My brother's kids banged on my door at 2 a.m. Their parents locked them out again. So I taught him a lesson he'll never forget. Hey Reddit, never thought I'd be one of those people posting family drama online. But this situation got so completely messed up that I need to get it off my chest and maybe warn others who might be in similar situations. My brother kept locking his kids out of the house in the middle of the night, and they'd show up at my door crying, freezing, and terrified. After months of watching this pattern escalate, I finally made sure he'd never pull that stunt again. Here's the whole story of how it went down. I'm 34, single, work as an electrician doing mostly commercial jobs around the city. Office buildings, warehouses, retail spaces, that kind of thing. I own a small 2-bedroom house in a decent middle-class neighborhood where people actually mow their lawns, take care of their properties, and nobody blasts music at 3 a.m. or leaves broken cars rusting in driveways. It's quiet, predictable, safe. Exactly what I wanted after years of apartment living with paper-thin walls, upstairs neighbors who sounded like they were training for MMA fights at midnight, And people who thought personal space and consideration for others were just polite suggestions rather than basic human decency. Bought the house 5 years ago when I was 29. Saved up for years, working overtime whenever I could get it, skipping vacations and eating cheap meals to build that down payment. The neighborhood's older but well-maintained tree-lined streets, kids riding bikes during the day, people who wave when you drive past. My house is nothing fancy. Built in the 1970s, needs some updates, but it's solid. I've been slowly renovating it myself, room by room, using the skills I picked up on job sites and from watching countless YouTube tutorials late at night. My brother Tyler is 38, married to a woman named Christina, and they've got 2 kids, Emma, who's 8, and Logan, who's 6. On paper, they look like a normal suburban family. Nice house, 2 cars, the whole package. But behind closed doors, complete disaster. Tyler and I grew up in the same house but turned out completely different. I learned early that if you want something, you work for it. He learned that if you complain loud enough, someone else handles your problems. Our parents enabled him constantly, always making excuses for his laziness and poor decisions. By the time we were teenagers, the pattern was set. I was the responsible one. He was the golden child who could do no wrong. When Tyler married Christina 7 years ago, I knew it would be a train wreck. She's one of those people who thinks having kids is like getting a puppy. Fun until you realize they require actual work. They had Emma right away, then Logan 2 years later, and suddenly reality hit that children need constant attention, supervision, and care. The problem started small. Tyler and Christina would complain at family gatherings about how exhausting parenting was, how they never got time alone anymore. But instead of actually parenting and creating structure, they seemed to resent the kids for existing and needing things. I started noticing concerning things at family dinners. The way Tyler would snap at Emma for asking simple questions. How Christina would ignore Logan when he tried to show her something. The kids would sit quietly with tablets while adults talked, and if they made noise, they'd get harsh looks and be told to go away. But I didn't say anything. Wasn't my place. People handle stress differently. Maybe it would get better. They didn't get better. They got exponentially worse. The first incident that really opened my eyes happened on a Tuesday night in late September, about 6 months ago from now. I was deep asleep, actually having a decent dream for once, when someone started pounding on my front door at exactly 2:17 a.m., according to my phone. Not gentle knocking, not the doorbell, but full-on desperate panic pounding, like the house was actively on fire. And seconds mattered. I jolted awake with my heart racing, stumbled out of bed in my boxers and t-shirt, grabbed my phone to call the cops if this turned out to be some kind of home invasion or emergency, and carefully looked through the peephole expecting to see who knows what. Cops, firefighters, someone injured, anything but what was actually there. 2 small figures stood on my porch under the yellow glow of the porch light. My niece Emma and nephew Logan, both wearing thin pajamas, no coats, no shoes, just socks. Emma was holding Logan's hand while he openly sobbed, his whole little body shaking. I yanked the door open immediately, cold air rushing into my house. "What the heck? What are you 2 doing here at 2 in the morning?" Emma looked up at me with red, puffy eyes that had clearly been crying for a while. Her voice was small and scared. "Mom and Dad locked us out. We knocked and knocked on the door, but they won't open it. We don't know what to do." My blood went absolutely cold despite the chill from outside. It was 40 degrees according to my weather app. These kids were standing outside in thin cotton pajamas and socks, no protective clothing whatsoever, in the middle of the night, 3 blocks from their house. "Come inside right this second. Right now." I pulled them in, immediately closed the door against the cold, grabbed blankets from the closet, and got them wrapped up on my couch. Logan was shaking badly. I couldn't tell if it was from the cold or from crying or both. His face was blotchy and wet with tears. Emma tried to act brave and composed, like she was the adult in this situation, but I could see the fear in her eyes. This 8-year-old kid was terrified and trying to hold it together for her younger brother. I got them situated with the blankets, turned up the thermostat, and sat down in front of them. "Okay, I need you to tell me exactly what happened tonight. Start from the beginning and don't leave anything out." Emma took a shaky breath and explained the whole situation. They'd been watching TV in the living room around midnight, already way past when kids that age should be up on a school night. Their parents were in the master bedroom with the door closed as usual, not supervising, not checking on them. Emma had gotten hungry and went to the kitchen for a snack. When she came back through the living room, she noticed the front door was standing wide open. She went to close it because it was cold, and when she turned around, she realized her parents had come out and locked their bedroom door. She knocked and knocked, but they wouldn't respond. Then she realized Logan wasn't inside. He'd gone out to the backyard to check on their dog. They have this old retriever that sometimes sleeps in a doghouse outside. When Logan tried to come back in through the front door, it was locked. He tried the back door, also locked. Both kids ended up completely locked out of the house, every entry point secured. Parents not responding to doorbell, knocking, nothing. They'd walked 3 blocks to my house in the dark, in their pajamas, because they didn't know what else to do, and didn't know any neighbors well enough to knock on their doors at 2 a.m. Emma knew where I lived because she'd been here for a few birthday parties. So they walked, in the cold and dark, on empty streets, just 2 little kids trying to find safety. I called Tyler immediately, fighting to keep my voice calm, when what I really wanted to do was reach through the phone and shake some sense into him. The phone rang 4 times before he picked up, voice groggy and irritated like I'd just interrupted something important. What? Your kids are at my house. You locked them out of the house. Long pause on his end. Then, with zero concern in his voice, what are you talking about? Emma and Logan are sitting on my couch right now wrapped in blankets. They walked 3 blocks to my house at 2 in the morning because you and Christina locked them out of the house. We didn't lock them out. They must have gone outside to play or something and the door shut behind them. Kids do stuff like that. Tyler, Emma said you locked the bedroom door and wouldn't answer when they knocked. Logan was locked outside trying to get back in. It's 40 degrees out and they're in thin pajamas. She's exaggerating like kids do. We were asleep. We didn't hear anything. Just send them home. Send them home? It's 2 a.m. They're in pajamas with no shoes, and they just walked 3 blocks in the cold because their parents locked them out. So drive them over then. I'm not getting out of bed for this. I have work in the morning. That's the moment I knew with absolute certainty that this wasn't just some unfortunate accident or misunderstanding. He wasn't panicked, wasn't apologizing profusely, wasn't rushing over to get his kids or expressing any relief that they were safe. He was simply annoyed that I'd interrupted his sleep and was now making demands for his time and attention. I drove them back anyway because they needed to be home, needed their beds, needed their school clothes and backpacks for the next morning. The whole drive over, Emma just stared silently out the window, not saying anything while Logan fell asleep against her shoulder, exhausted from crying and walking and fear. This little 6-year-old kid who should have been safe in bed was instead traumatized and exhausted at 2:30 in the morning. Tyler answered his front door wearing just his boxers and an undershirt, looking irritated and impatient like we were inconveniencing him. Didn't thank me for bringing them home. Didn't apologize for what happened. Didn't check to see if the kids were okay. Didn't ask if they were cold or scared. Just took them by the shoulders, guided them inside, and shut the door in my face without another word. I stood there on his porch for a solid minute, just staring at that closed door, processing what had just happened. The complete dismissiveness, the total lack of concern for his children's safety and well-being, the casual way he dismissed their fear and my worry. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong in that house, and those kids were paying the price for their parents' failures. Drove home and couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. Just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, kept thinking about Emma's scared face when she first appeared on my porch, about Logan crying, about how 2 small children had walked 3 blocks in the dark to find help because the people who were supposed to protect them had literally locked them out in the cold. The images kept replaying in my head on an endless loop. I told myself it was probably a one-time thing, a terrible mistake. Maybe Tyler had been confused or half asleep. Maybe there was some explanation that made sense. People screw up sometimes. Parents make mistakes. Maybe this was just one bad night and everything would be fine going forward. I was wrong. So completely, utterly wrong. 2 weeks later, on a Friday night, it happened again. This time it was 1:45 a.m. when the pounding started. Same desperate banging on my front door. Same 2 kids on my porch. Same thin pajamas and bare feet. October now. Temperatures dropping into the 30s at night, getting dangerously cold for kids dressed for indoor comfort. They did it again, Emma said quietly when I opened the door, her voice flat and resigned like she'd already accepted this as normal. I brought them inside immediately, got them wrapped in blankets and warming up, and this time I was prepared with detailed questions. I needed to understand exactly what was happening and why. Tell me everything that happened tonight, from the very beginning. Don't skip any details. Emma explained in that tired, defeated voice that they'd both been in bed, actually asleep for once, at a reasonable hour. Logan woke up around 1 a.m. needing to use the bathroom urgently, but when he tried their bedroom door, it was locked from the outside. He knocked for their parents, called out for them, but nobody came. He really couldn't hold it anymore, and had an accident right there by the door, which woke Emma up. They both started knocking louder then yelling, then pounding on the door, trying desperately to get their parents to come unlock it. Nothing. Complete silence from the other side. Emma said she could hear the TV on in the living room, could see the light under their bedroom door, absolutely knew someone was awake out there. But nobody came to help. Nobody responded to their desperate calls. Eventually, Emma had figured out how to use a hanger to pop the window screen off their bedroom window. They both climbed out, and this is the part that made my stomach drop. They climbed out a second-story window, dropped down into the bushes below that fortunately broke their fall, and then walked to my house because the front door was locked from the inside and they couldn't get back in any other way. A second-story window. These kids, an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, had climbed out a second-story window in the middle of the night in the cold because their parents had deliberately locked them in their room and wouldn't let them out even for basic bathroom needs. This time, I took extensive photos with my phone. Pictures of their pajamas still slightly damp from Logan's accident. Their bare feet, dirty from walking on sidewalks. The timestamp on my phone clearly showing 1:45 a.m. I asked Emma to tell me the whole story again while I recorded video, getting her statement documented. She looked completely exhausted, but answered every single question I asked with heartbreaking detail. I called Tyler again, and this time the conversation was even worse because he didn't even pretend to be surprised or concerned. "They're at your place again, huh?" Not, "Oh no, are they okay?" Not, "What happened?" Just casual acknowledgement like this was becoming routine. "You locked them in their bedroom, Tyler. They had to climb out a second-story window to get out. We lock their door at night so they don't wander around the house and get into stuff or make noise that keeps us awake. It's called establishing boundaries and structure. Maybe if you actually had kids of your own, you'd understand how parenting works. Tyler, they climbed out a second-story window. They could have been seriously injured. Logan needed to use the bathroom and you locked him in the room with no way out. That's their choice to climb out. They could have just stayed in their room quietly and gone back to sleep like normal kids. Logan's 6 years old. He can learn to hold it until morning." The casual cruelty in his voice, the complete lack of empathy or concern, made me want to reach through the phone and physically shake him until his brain started working properly. But I kept my voice level and calm, told him I was bringing the kids back home, and hung up before I said something I'd regret and make the situation worse for Emma and Logan. Drove them home once again. Tyler didn't even bother coming to the door this time. Christina answered instead, wearing pajamas and looking annoyed that she had to pause whatever streaming show she was binge-watching. She took the kids without saying a single word to them or me and shut the door in my face just like Tyler had done before. That's when I made the decision to start seriously documenting everything. Went to the store the next morning and bought a dedicated notebook just for this. Started writing down exact dates, times, detailed descriptions of exactly what the kids told me had happened, took more photos, kept everything organized. Because somewhere deep down, I knew this pattern wasn't going to stop on its own, and eventually, I was going to need ironclad proof of what was happening to build a case for intervention. The third incident happened 3 weeks later, and this one was somehow even worse than the first two. School night, 11:30 p.m., and only Emma showed up at my door this time. She was alone, shivering, arms wrapped around herself trying to stay warm. "Where's Logan?" I asked immediately, looking past her expecting to see him following. "Still inside. They only locked me out this time." The story she told made my blood boil. She'd asked for a glass of water after her official bedtime because she was genuinely thirsty. Her dad had yelled at her to go back to bed and stop bothering them. She'd explained politely that she really was thirsty and just needed some water. That's when he'd grabbed her roughly by the arm, marched her straight to the front door, physically pushed her outside in her pajamas, and locked the door behind her. Just like that. No warning, no second chance, just immediate punishment for the crime of being a thirsty 8-year-old child. Emma had knocked and knocked on that door, pleading to be let back in. Nobody answered. She could hear Logan crying inside the house, could hear her dad's voice yelling at Logan to shut up and go to sleep. So she'd walked the 3 blocks to my house alone in the dark because she had literally nowhere else to go. I documented everything again with the same careful attention to detail. Photos of her standing there in thin pajamas with goosebumps on her arms. Video of her explaining exactly what happened in her own words. Wrote down every single detail in my notebook with times, dates, direct quotes. The evidence file was growing. Then I called Tyler for the 3rd time, and the conversation went exactly as badly as expected. "Your daughter is at my house again. You physically shoved her outside and locked the door behind her because she asked for a glass of water. She wouldn't stop whining and nagging about being thirsty when we'd already told her it was bedtime. Maybe a few minutes outside by herself will teach her to appreciate what she has and follow the rules we set. It's 40 degrees outside, Tyler. She's 8 years old. She's in thin pajamas. She's fine. Stop babying her and acting like she's fragile. Kids today are too soft because everyone treats them like they'll break. A little cold air never hurt anybody. I'm bringing her back right now, and then you and I are going to have a very serious conversation about what's been happening in your house. Don't bother coming inside. And I'm done listening to your sanctimonious lectures about parenting when you don't have kids and don't understand what it's like. He actually hung up on me. Just ended the call mid-conversation because he didn't want to hear anything I had to say. I drove Emma back to their house, but this time I didn't just drop her at the door like I'd done before. This time I rang that doorbell and kept ringing it until Tyler answered, looking even more annoyed than usual. Then I pushed right past him into his house without asking permission or waiting for an invitation, walked into his living room, and found Logan curled up on the couch with red, swollen eyes and tear-stained cheeks, clearly having cried himself into exhaustion. I turned to face Tyler and Christina, who'd come out from wherever she'd been hiding. This stops right now. Tonight. You cannot keep locking your kids out of the house in the cold. It's dangerous, it's cruel, it's going to get someone seriously hurt, and it's completely unacceptable. Tyler crossed his arms defensively. It's my house and my kids. I'll parent them however I see fit. You don't get a say in this. What you're doing isn't parenting. It's neglect at best and abuse at worst. Get out of my house right now before I call the cops on you for trespassing. Christina appeared fully in the hallway then, adding her voice to the confrontation. You really need to leave. You're not their parent. You don't have kids. You don't get any say in how we choose to raise our children. This is none of your business. I looked at both of them standing there, Tyler defiant and justified, Christina with that perpetually irritated expression, and realized these people had no business being responsible for other human beings. This isn't over. Not even close, I told them both, and then left before the situation escalated further. Drove home and spent the next 2 hours researching everything I could find online about child protective services, mandatory reporting laws for concerned family members, and what exactly constitutes legal child neglect and endangerment in our state. Turned out that repeatedly locking young children out of the house in cold weather, especially at night, checked pretty much every single box for serious endangerment. The definitions were crystal clear. What Tyler and Christina were doing wasn't just bad parenting or questionable discipline. It was textbook neglect that put the kids in genuine danger. But I hesitated. They were my brother's kids. Family. And calling CPS felt like crossing a line you can never come back from. Like dropping a bomb on family relationships that would destroy everything permanently. I kept hoping somehow Tyler would come to his senses. That he'd realize what he was doing and stop before things got worse. Things got worse. The fourth incident was the absolute breaking point that forced my hand. Mid-November, early winter really settling in, temperature dropped down to 28 degrees overnight, well below freezing. Actually dangerous weather for anyone outside without proper clothing. I woke up at 3:15 a.m. to that familiar, desperate pounding on my door. Both kids this time, Emma practically dragging Logan, who was barely conscious and couldn't walk properly on his own. Got them inside immediately, and Logan's skin was ice cold to the touch, like touching frozen meat. His lips had a distinct blue tinge to them. His skin was pale and waxy. He could barely speak, just making little whimpering sounds. Emma was crying hard, saying they'd been locked outside for over an hour, trying to stay warm, huddled together in the bushes along the side of the house. But it kept getting colder, and Logan started acting strange and couldn't stay awake. I didn't hesitate this time. Called 911 immediately. Told the emergency dispatcher I had 2 children with possible hypothermia who'd been deliberately locked out of their house by their parents. Ambulance arrived within 10 minutes. Paramedics immediately went to work checking both kids' vital signs and core body temperatures. They determined Logan absolutely needed to go to the hospital to be properly monitored and treated because his body temperature was dangerously low. The paramedics asked their standard protocol questions about what had happened. Emma told them the complete truth. Their parents had locked them outside. They'd tried and tried to get back inside but couldn't. They'd walked to my house, but it took much longer than usual because Logan kept having to stop and rest, and Emma had to help him walk. Hospital staff, I learned, are mandatory reporters by law. The absolute moment they heard the story about kids being deliberately locked outside in freezing weather by their own parents, they were legally required to contact Child Protective Services. The wheels were set in motion whether I was ready or not. Tyler showed up at the emergency room about 40 minutes later, not concerned or panicked, just absolutely furious that I'd called an ambulance and gotten CPS involved in what he considered private family business. Christina stayed home, apparently couldn't even be bothered to drive to the hospital to check on her own kid who was being treated for hypothermia. That told me everything I needed to know about her priorities. "You had absolutely no right to do this," Tyler hissed at me in the hospital hallway, while doctors were examining Logan in a room nearby. "No right at all to involve outside people in our private family matters. Your son has hypothermia, Tyler. He was locked outside in 28-degree weather wearing pajamas. What exactly did you expect me to do? Let him freeze? Bring him home like you always do and mind your own business. Now we've got CPS breathing down our necks and making our lives hell because you couldn't just handle things quietly within the family. Maybe if you and Christina didn't keep locking your kids outside in freezing weather, CPS wouldn't need to be involved. Ever think of that? They're completely fine. Stop being so dramatic about everything. You're making this into something it's not." A CPS caseworker arrived about an hour later. Professional woman in her 50s named Patricia, who clearly had years of experience dealing with exactly these kinds of situations. She interviewed Emma and Logan separately in private rooms, spoke extensively with the medical staff about their conditions and what they'd reported, reviewed the hospital treatment records, and then asked if she could talk to me. I showed her absolutely everything I'd been documenting. The notebook filled with dates, times, and detailed descriptions. All the photos I'd taken on my phone. The videos of the kids explaining in their own words what had happened each time. Months of careful documentation, proving beyond any doubt that this was an established pattern of behavior, not just isolated incidents or misunderstandings. Patricia's face got progressively harder and more serious with each piece of evidence I showed her. She'd probably seen a lot of terrible things in her career, but this clearly still affected her. This is very serious neglect. These children are in real danger. This behavior is completely unacceptable and endangering. Tyler tried to minimize and deflect everything. Said the kids were exaggerating like kids do. Said they'd locked themselves out by accident and were making up stories. Said I was overreacting because I didn't have kids of my own and was poisoning CPS against him because of some personal grudge. Patricia wasn't buying any of it for even a second. "Mr. Wilson, I have extensive documentation from your brother showing this has happened at least 4 documented times over the past 2 months. I have hospital records right here showing your son was just treated for hypothermia. I have detailed statements from both children, separately describing being locked out of the house repeatedly in the middle of the night in freezing temperatures. This isn't exaggeration, and this isn't accident. This is a clear, established pattern of child endangerment. They're my kids. I'm allowed to discipline them however I see fit. That's my right as their father. Not when that so-called discipline puts them at serious risk of injury or death. Locking young children outside in freezing weather wearing only pajamas is not discipline. It's abuse. And it stops right now. The word abuse just hung there in the air between them. Tyler's face turned red, but he couldn't actually argue against it because she was absolutely right, and he knew it. CPS formally opened an official investigation that same day. They conducted a surprise home visit the very next morning, interviewed both Tyler and Christina separately without allowing them to coordinate their stories, photographed every room in the house looking for evidence of neglect or danger, and talked to Emma and Logan's teachers at their elementary school. Turned out the teachers had already noticed concerning things they'd been quietly worrying about. Both kids frequently falling asleep in class, Emma hoarding snacks and food in her backpack, like she wasn't sure when she'd eat again. Logan being unusually anxious and scared about going home at the end of the school day. Within 1 week of intensive investigation, CPS had gathered enough evidence to formally recommend removing the children from the home temporarily, while the investigation continued, and the parents received mandatory intervention. Tyler and Christina would be required to complete comprehensive parenting classes, undergo regular unannounced home visits from CPS staff, attend counseling sessions, and demonstrate they could actually provide a consistently safe environment before the kids could potentially return. Tyler completely lost his mind when he got that news. Called me on my cell phone literally screaming at the top of his lungs that I'd destroyed his family, that I'd turned CPS against him with lies and manipulation, that his kids were being stolen away from him because of my exaggerations and interference. I just let him yell and scream himself hoarse, then calmly said, "Your kids are being temporarily removed because you repeatedly locked them outside in freezing weather, because Logan ended up in the hospital being treated for hypothermia, because you showed absolutely zero concern for their safety or well-being, because teachers reported concerns about their behavior and condition. This isn't my fault. It's entirely yours. You did this to yourself. You're dead to me. You hear me? Dead. You'll never see these kids again. You're not family anymore. Then he hung up before I could respond. Fine by me. CPS needed emergency placement for Emma and Logan while everything got sorted out. They asked if I'd be willing to take them temporarily until they could either find an appropriate foster placement or Tyler completed all requirements to get them back. I said yes immediately without any hesitation. These kids desperately needed stability, structure, safety, and someone who actually gave a damn about them as human beings. I had the physical space in my house, I had a stable job with predictable income, and I had months of documentation proving I'd been the one consistently protecting them and looking out for their welfare all along. The CPS home visit took 2 days to arrange and complete. They checked every inch of my house, ran extensive background checks on me, interviewed my employer about my work history and reliability, talked to my neighbors about whether I was a responsible person. Everything came back completely clean. By the end of that week, Emma and Logan were officially placed in my temporary custody with CPS oversight. The first night they actually stayed at my house felt completely surreal, like I'd stepped into an alternate reality version of my life. I'd spent the previous 3 days frantically converting my home office into a proper bedroom for Emma. New bed, new dresser, cheerful bedding, posters on the walls. Set up Logan in my guest room with kid-appropriate furniture and toys. Went to Target and bought what felt like the entire children's section. New clothes in their sizes, school supplies, backpacks, winter coats, shoes, everything they needed. Emma cried herself to sleep that first night, not because she missed her parents or wanted to go back. She was scared they'd somehow show up and force her and Logan to return. She kept asking if the doors were locked, if Tyler could just break in and take them. I sat in the hallway right outside her room until she finally dozed off from exhaustion, promising her over and over that nobody would hurt her here, that she was safe now, that I wouldn't let anyone take them back. Logan adjusted faster, probably because he was younger and more resilient. The kid was 6 years old and just genuinely happy to be somewhere. He didn't have to constantly worry about being locked outside in the cold. He asked if he could have a snack whenever he wanted without permission, and when I told him yes, of course, help yourself, his entire face lit up like Christmas morning. Such a simple thing that most kids take for granted, but for him it was freedom. School became our new daily routine. I'd wake up at 6 a.m. every morning, make breakfast, pack their lunches with the foods they actually liked, drive them to school, then head to my work sites. Pick them up at 3 p.m., help them with homework at the kitchen table, make dinner, supervise bath time, read bedtime stories, all the normal kid stuff that should have been happening all along. It was absolutely exhausting, and I'd never worked harder in my life, but it felt right in a way my previous solitary existence never had. Tyler and Christina were required by court order to complete 12 full weeks of parenting classes, attend mandatory counseling sessions twice weekly, and undergo random unannounced home visits from CPS staff. They were allowed supervised visits with the kids every other weekend. Supervised meaning I had to be physically present the entire time to make sure nothing inappropriate happened. That first supervised visit was an absolute disaster and showed me everything I needed to know about whether they'd changed. Tyler spent the entire 2-hour visit complaining bitterly about how unfair the system was, how CPS had no right to take his kids away, how I'd ruined everything with my interference and exaggerations. He didn't ask Emma a single question about school or her friends, didn't play with Logan or show any interest in what he'd been doing, just wallowed in his own victim complex and sense of persecution. Christina was somehow even worse. She kept making passive-aggressive comments about how the kids looked perfectly fine and healthy, so clearly this whole thing was just blown way out of proportion and unnecessary. Emma sat rigidly silent the entire visit, not engaging, visibly uncomfortable. Logan played with toys in the corner, actively trying to ignore both his parents, like they were strangers he didn't want to interact with. When that visit finally ended, Logan immediately asked me if he had to go back with them. When I told him no, not today, you're staying with me, he visibly relaxed and his whole body language changed. That's the moment I knew with absolute certainty these kids were genuinely better off without their parents in their daily lives. CPS caseworker Patricia called me about a week later with updates on Tyler and Christina's progress through the required programs. Tyler had already missed 2 separate parenting classes without valid excuses and had shown up 30 minutes late to his individual counseling session. Christina had straight up refused to participate in role-playing exercises during the group parenting class, declaring they were stupid and pointless, and she didn't need strangers teaching her how to parent her own children. This isn't looking promising at all, Patricia admitted to me over the phone with clear frustration in her voice. In my experience, most parents in their situation are absolutely desperate to complete all requirements and get their children back as quickly as possible. They'll do anything, attend every session, follow every rule. But these two seem far more interested in being right and justified than in actually getting their kids back. That tells me a lot about their priorities. That's when I made my final decision. What would it take for me to petition for permanent custody instead of temporary? You'd need to file formal paperwork with the court. Given the circumstances, the children's current stable placement, and the parents' lack of progress, you'd likely have a very strong case. But you need to understand it would mean your brother and his wife permanently losing their parental rights. That's not something that gets reversed. They lost those rights the very first time they deliberately locked their kids outside at 2 a.m. in the cold. They just didn't realize it yet. Patricia didn't argue with my assessment. I hired a family law attorney who specialized in custody cases. Cost me $3,000 upfront plus ongoing fees. But it was worth every single penny to make sure Emma and Logan stayed permanently safe. The attorney reviewed all my extensive documentation, the detailed notebook, all the photos, the videos, the medical records from Logan's hospital visit for hypothermia. She told me it was genuinely one of the strongest, most well-documented cases of parental neglect she'd personally seen in her entire career. We filed for permanent custody. Tyler and Christina were officially served papers 3 weeks later. Tyler showed up at my house at 11 p.m. that same night, pounding on my door hard enough to wake the kids upstairs. I immediately went outside to deal with him, so Emma and Logan wouldn't hear the inevitable screaming and conflict. "You're trying to steal my kids. That's what this is. Theft. I'm trying to protect them from you. There's a fundamental difference. They're my kids. You have absolutely no right to them. You gave up that right when you repeatedly locked them outside in freezing weather, and one of them ended up in the hospital. Actions have consequences. That's discipline. Kids need firm boundaries and structure, or they turn into spoiled brats. Kids need parents who don't actively endanger their lives." We went back and forth for 20 minutes. Tyler getting progressively more unhinged with each exchange, his voice getting louder, and his arguments more desperate. He eventually escalated to actual threats, saying he'd make me pay for what I'd done to his family, and I'd regret ever interfering. I pulled out my phone and started obviously recording video, which immediately shut him up. Nothing stops aggressive behavior faster than knowing it's being documented. "You need to leave my property right now. You're violating the custody arrangement by being here and threatening me. Leave before I call the police." He finally left, but not before putting his fist completely through my metal mailbox in a rage, leaving a massive dent. I immediately called the police, filed an official report, and added that incident and the video to my growing evidence pile. The court hearing was scheduled for February, 3 months away. 3 months of waiting while Emma and Logan continued adjusting to their new stable life with me. They absolutely thrived during that time, in ways I'd never seen before. Their grades improved dramatically. Emma started actually smiling and laughing. Logan stopped having frequent nightmares about being locked outside in the cold. Their teachers called me multiple times, amazed by the transformation. They said they'd never witnessed such a dramatic positive improvement in students before. Emma went from barely scraping by with C's and D's to consistently getting A's and B's. Logan stopped hoarding food in his backpack and desk, stopped being anxious and jumpy, actually started participating in class discussions and activities. Tyler and Christina technically finished the required parenting classes under duress and threat of losing their kids permanently, but they clearly hadn't actually changed anything fundamental about their attitudes or behavior. During the supervised visits, they'd constantly complain about the requirements, about CPS interfering, about me destroying their family, but they never actually engaged meaningfully with Emma and Logan. It was like they viewed the kids as possessions they'd been robbed of rather than actual human beings they'd endangered. Court day finally arrived. Both sides presented evidence. My attorney systematically laid out the entire documented timeline of neglect, showed the hospital records from Logan's hypothermia treatment, presented the CPS reports and findings, displayed all the documentation I'd carefully gathered over months. Tyler's attorney tried weakly arguing that, yes, mistakes had been made, but the parents had now completed all required classes and deserved another chance to prove themselves. The judge asked to speak privately with Emma and Logan. Emma spoke clearly and confidently, saying she felt safe living with me and definitely didn't want to go back. Logan, 6 years old, told the judge directly that he liked his new room at my house and didn't want to have to sleep outside in the cold anymore. That simple statement from a 6-year-old hit the courtroom like a bomb. The judge asked Logan to clarify. He matter-of-factly explained how at his old house he'd sometimes had to sleep outside when they locked him out, but at my house he always had a warm bed and never had to be cold or scared. The judge's face went hard. She reviewed the evidence, asked clarifying questions to both attorneys, then made her ruling. Based on the clearly documented pattern of serious neglect, the medical evidence of endangerment, the children's own testimony about their experiences, and the parents' failure to demonstrate genuine change in their attitudes or behavior, I am granting permanent custody to the uncle. Parental rights of Tyler and Christina Wilson are hereby permanently terminated. Tyler absolutely exploded in the courtroom, screaming and yelling so loudly he had to be physically escorted out by bailiffs while screaming about corruption, kidnapping, and injustice. Christina just sat there looking annoyed and put out like this entire legal proceeding was nothing more than a massive inconvenience in her life rather than losing her children forever. That was it. Emma and Logan were officially, legally, permanently mine. We celebrated that night with ice cream and a movie marathon, just the three of us. Emma asked if this meant she'd never have to see her parents again unless she chose to. I told her that was exactly what it meant. Completely her choice. No pressure either way. She shook her head firmly. No. Logan asked if he could paint his bedroom any color he wanted, and I told him absolutely. We'd go pick out paint this weekend. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.